and a very warm welcome to the final conference of the Baltic Science Network. It is wonderful to welcome you here, all at these beautiful premises. And you all know it's quite chilly outside, it's also sunny outside, so what we're going to try to do is to bring the sun at least a little bit inside. And of course, we need your help for that. So, my name is Charlotte Gedink, I'm a moderator within my own company, Charlie Speaks, and it is a great pleasure to be moderating today's event. So, let me first start with a couple of practicalities. Please switch your phones on silent mode. However, you are more than welcome to use your phones. You can interact with us online via Twitter, via the hashtag Baltic Science. Also, pictures will be taken during this event, and the event will also be live streamed. So I'm just waving quickly to the people that are sitting either back home or in their offices and unfortunately couldn't make it live. Also, an after movie will be made of the conference, so please be aware of that you might feature on that as well. And also, in between the different sessions, the coffee breaks will be taking place outside this conference room. And then two final remarks. In case you haven't found the Wi-Fi login code yet, the Wi-Fi login is WLAN, so WLAN 09. And then the password is LU2019CBSS. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we also would like to make sure that you will be part of the discussion. So we also take care of interaction with you by means of microphones that will go around today. So, ladies and gentlemen, why are we actually here today? It has almost been 3 years, and now we're celebrating the closing event of the BSN. Yet, actually, it really is the beginning of yielding what has been sowed the past years. The BSR itself can really be considered a testbed for developing and implementing innovative measures for exploiting the macro-region's full research and innovation potential. So on behalf of the Baltic Science Network, the Secretariat of the Council of the Baltic Sea States, and the University of Latvia, the final conference of this Baltic Sea Network is embedded in the annual CBSS Baltic Sea Science Day. The jointly organized event is dedicated to the 100th anniversary of the University of Latvia. So what will we do today? New ideas and fresh food for thought will be brought to the floor in 3 different sessions. So we will have a session on mobility in higher education and research. We will have a session on research excellence. And finally, we will have a session on widening participation in the European research area. So the event really offers a unique opportunity to you, not only to learn a lot and reflect on the outcomes, but also to network with your colleagues from all over the BSN. So, that's enough talking, at least from my side for now. I'd like to welcome to the floor for the opening remarks Ms. Eva Gümbel, Deputy Minister of Science, Research and Equalities of the Free and Hanseatic City of Hamburg. The floor is yours. A big hand, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear State Secretary Lina, dear colleagues and dear friends of the Baltic Sea region. The Baltic Sea region is not only a key economic region today, but also one of the most competitive knowledge regions in the world. With the richness of excellence, research, infrastructures and scientists, the BSR thrives as a region of research excellence and continues to contribute to building a knowledge-based society. Therefore, I'm immensely proud that the Ministry of Science, Research and Equalities of the Free and Hanseatic City of Hamburg acted as lead partner for the Baltic Science Network. The project funded by the Interreg program showed how its work over the past 3 years the vast potential for science cooperation in the region and opened with its recommendations, new door for collaboration in the macro region. The EU concept of macro regions, and the BSR is one of those, is the sleeping beauty of its EU policy. forced by the 3 no's from the beginning, such as no money, no legislation, and no institutions. The macro regions developed into a powerful bottom-up approach and can serve today as a role model for successful multi-level governments. The Baltic Science Network is a very good example for that, as we have seen over the course of our project. Science policy issues are discussed in BSR in a very inclusive way. We incorporate perspectives from ministries, universities, and research institutions, as well as funding agencies, in the decision-making just from the beginning on equal footing. We believe that the Baltic Sea region has a lot to offer, both for furthering the prosperity in the region and as a role model for other macro regions and the EU. Therefore, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the final conference of the Baltic Science Network here today. This conference follows the Council of the Baltic Sea States high-level meeting on science earlier today this morning. During that meeting, the participants agreed on boosting science cooperation in our macro region on the findings on BSN. So this conference will present and discuss the project results and offer pathways for continuous collaboration in the BSR. We have convinced a variety of outstanding experts to participate in the different panels to discuss important topics for the BSR. In today's panels, we will debate new concepts, as you have heard already, new concepts for mobility in the macro region, joint areas of research and innovation excellence, and lastly, widening participation in the European research area. BSN chose to focus on these 3 topics because we realized that the countries in the BSR are faced with similar challenges in our higher education and research systems. By creating a common framework to address these challenges, we can facilitate solutions that not only benefit single actors but enable the region as a whole to prosper. We are glad that today we are able to present to you the results of our work and discuss it with distinguished experts. I would like to use this opportunity to extend my gratitude to everyone involved in the project over the past 3 years and the conference today, both on stage and backstage, and I think we can clap our hands. Thank you for that. By facilitating mobility in research and higher education within the region, we are able to mitigate the apparent brain drain and turn it into a brain circulation. To maintain the level of research excellence in the region we currently exhibit, we need to focus our efforts on increasing the mobility of highly skilled scientists and additionally attract foreign talents. Therefore, BSN is proud to present today the mobility tools that are tailor-made for the Baltic Sea region in the first panel discussion. As one of the most innovative science regions in the world, the Baltic Sea region nevertheless has to find solutions on how to maintain and increase its level of scientific excellence in R&I. BSN tackled this issue by identifying high potential fields of joint scientific excellence, namely photon and neutron science, life sciences, and welfare state. For these research areas, BSN enlisted brilliant experts in their fields to devise transnational strategies on how to further cooperation in them. We are excited to practically implement the recommendations of these expert groups, for example, by feeding the results of the life science and the photo and neutron group into the new HALOS project, the Hanseatic League of Science. The project is a unique collaboration between Hamburg and Southwest Scandinavia, bringing together the 4 unique research facilities, MAX4, ESS, DESI, and the European IXFEL. The project creates a center for integrated and world-leading life science innovation and research. The implications of BSN results for the region will be discussed in the second panel. Lastly, today's conference will shine a light on the topic of widening participation. In the Baltic Science Network, we had the great challenge and opportunity to find modes of cooperation between EU 13 and EU 15 member states and the Baltic Rim countries. At first glance, these countries might have different challenges and needs, but the work of BSN has shown that widening participation benefits the region as a whole. Thus, we are very well advised to find approaches of cooperation from which all participants can gain a payoff. In conclusion, today's conference will showcase the benefits of joint research policies and strategies. Furthermore, we will show the cooperation and the frame of research and science enhances regional prosperity and growth. Lastly, the conference will demonstrate that science cooperation in the Baltic Sea region can serve as model for other European regions and the European research area. So I am looking forward to lively discussions, interesting exchange, and insightful talks. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your very kind words. And well, you talked about the Sleeping Beauty, but I think after 3 years of so much dedication, we can't really talk about a Sleeping Beauty anymore. I think she finally really flourished, and that's something indeed that you will focus on also for many years to come. So ladies and gentlemen, we will now show you a short movie of the Baltic Sea region, a powerhouse of science, to give you an even better idea of what the Baltic Sea region is all about.
The Baltic Sea is a powerhouse of science, and there is scientific excellence already. And the big challenges of today, like the protection of the Baltic Sea, climate change, the future of the welfare state, all these challenges cannot be solved on a nation-state level. Therefore, we need good cooperation among the regions, among the different countries. And our job as politicians, my job as politicians, is it to create a framework for that in order to make cooperation fruitful.
This is a national laboratory in the north of Hamburg, and we are operating several large-scale facilities to investigate the structure of matter. The Baltic Sea region hosts several high-tech analytical facilities, among them the European Spallation Source, currently under construction, and here in Hamburg the most powerful free electron laser, the European XFEL.
We are able to image the dynamics in matter with extremely high temporal and spatial resolution. And this is very important if we want to understand the properties of very complex biomolecules, for instance proteins, with a tremendous impact, for instance, in biology and medicine.
My research group is creating new methods for DNA modification analysis. Human genome is 3 billion letter sized book. For example, Divine Comedy by Dante is 600,000 letters. So every day we have to read 5,000 copies of Divine Comedy, go through these circles of Inferno, go to Purgatory, and if we are very lucky, we are going into the paradise and meeting the Betrich and identifying our disease biomarkers. This is our goal.
Here at Life Sciences Center of Vilnius University, where Professor Virgi Shikshnis has discovered the CRISPR systems that are used for gene editing, and is highly popular these days, and we're very proud of him. And there are many other researchers in many other fields that are being developed in life sciences here.
Disease diagnostics is a very competitive field. And if you want to succeed, you either must have excessive resources or you must create a collaborative network.
I'm professor of sociology in University of Turku, Department of Social Research. And I'm doing research on intergenerational attainment, how parents influence their kids. The issue of migration is one of the key topics in the welfare state research as well, because I mean the welfare state is always depending on the population of the nations, and when this population changes in the fast time, that also means that the welfare state has to change somehow.
I think a major challenge is to find out how the ocean reacts to climate change. We know that it's getting warmer, that it's losing oxygen, and that it's getting more acidic, and this has consequences for marine life.
My research project is about the effects of microplastics on the Baltic population of blue mussels, and my project contributes to better understand the impacts of plastic waste on the seas.
I think the collaboration with institutes from the Baltic Sea region is very important in this respect, because it helps to bring the results to a larger scale and therefore increases the relevance of the research. When we want to document trends, it's important to look at various places and not only just one, so that we can get an overall picture.
The extensive network of science institutions in the Baltic region helps me immensely to see my research questions in a bigger context.
Anders Ødegaard, Head of Office of the Danish Agency for Higher Education and Science in Denmark. Boris Zelezov, Deputy Director of the Department of the International Cooperation, Ministry of Higher Education and Science of the Russian Federation. Sebastian Skuza, Under-Secretary of State of the Ministry of Science and Higher Education from Poland. And last but not least, our two ladies. And first of all, I'd like to welcome back again Ms. Eva Gumbel. Thank you. And finally, and I'd like to ask you to take the stage, if that's okay by you, Liga Ligina, State Secretary of the Ministry of Education and Science from Latvia. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ministry of Education and Science, I'm glad to welcome you to the Project Baltic Science Network final conference. And we learned today already many times, but 3 years ago, when the Baltic Science Network just started, we could say that there was no micro-regional dimension in the science policy to the extent we can see it now. But the partners have worked, of the network have worked tirelessly to bridge the steps into direction towards harmonized science policy in the Baltic Sea region. And my part is to tell you that this morning it was my honor to chair the meeting of the high representatives of the Ministries of Science of the CBSS member states. You see the number of gentlemen here, and also ladies were present. And the meeting took place under the auspices of the Latvian presidency of the CBSS. And I want to thank the main supporters of the Baltic Science Network final conference and the CBSS events, the Deputy Minister of Science, Research and Equalities, Free and Hanseatic City of Hamburg, Eva Gumbel, Director of University of Latvia, Professor Indričs Mužnieks, being the host of these days, and the Deputy Director General of CBSS Secretariat, Bernd Hemingway. And of course, all of the colleagues in different countries that help this event to be here and to happen. So the aim of this morning meeting was the adoption of a joint statement regarding the cornerstones of science policy in the Baltic Sea region. And it is my honor to inform you that the high-level representatives of the Ministries of Science of the Council of the Baltic Sea states did agree on a certain number of things. And one of them, to recognize the value of further implementation of the amended CBSS Science Research and Innovation Agenda, promoting the Baltic Sea region as a leading science research innovation area both on a European and a global level. Another aspect that we had agreement on was to maintain and foster scientific excellence. As we saw, the Baltic Sea region hosts several top-class research institutions, universities, research infrastructure, and leading scientists. The countries of the Baltic Sea region agreed to maintain and foster this level of scientific excellence as a cornerstone for a more sustainable and prosperous region. And they acknowledged the need for closer collaboration to use the variety of skills and knowledge in science and the existing expertise and also infrastructures to their full capacity. There was, I could say even in the morning discussion, maybe one of the top issues raised to support mobility of researchers. As a transnational mobility of researchers is the foundation of cross-border cooperation, as it facilitates academic exchange and professional networks, expanding scientific excellence and making the best possible use of the existing and forthcoming research capacities. Overcoming the participation and innovation gap was another area of agreement that work should be taken further. So potential for scientific excellence does exist across all the Baltic Sea region, and the CBSS member states must utilize this potential further when it comes to acquiring funding for scientific research and participating in large-scale projects. Last but not least, to enable the transfer of science-based knowledge to society and industry. That facilitation of exchange of research between the private and public sectors will foster societal advancement, innovation and growth in the Baltic Sea region. So once again, I would like to express my gratitude for all the delegations and partners in showing our common understanding on the issues relevant in the Baltic Sea region and also common goals to be pursued. And therefore, I congratulate everyone with the joint statement adopted. And I think it comes at a perfect timing when the debate about the next multi-financial framework is ongoing and countries are preparing for their next planning periods and planning their investments and types of activities that would actually embed the decisions and these joint understanding into practice. So, and it also shows I think the potential still for even closer cooperation in the Baltic Sea region to really be a true science powerhouse for many more years to come. And I wish you profound debates and fruitful discussion in the afternoon session and a very successful conference today, but also actual practical work afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the supporting words. And now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Razumas.
Thank you, dear colleagues. It was said already that this morning we had a high-level meeting of the Baltic state region with the delegations of different countries and different organizations. And I have to repeat that Lithuania strongly supports the strengthening of this type of cooperation. A few words about what's going on in Lithuania now in trying to keep the science excellence and also competitiveness. And I would say that the new political persons at the Ministry of education, science and sports. They are looking for continuing reforms in the fields of higher education and research in our country. And I can give 4 examples. We are looking for improving of research and higher education funding and also evaluation principles. The second point is to optimize the institutional network of higher education institutions and also research institutions. And also we suggested with the joint efforts to strengthen our participation in EU research infrastructures and developing the roadmap of international cooperation. And the last point, now we are reviewing our smart specialization priorities, and we're looking forward to this evaluation to continue this project. Well, also Lithuania suggested some points to continue our cooperation within the Baltic state region, and we suggested to improve our cooperation on different levels, on the ministerial levels, research funding institutions, university associations, and also other organizations. One crucial point to our point of view is to improve our cooperation in the project of young researchers' mobility. I can say that of 11 member states of Baltic State region, only 3 states invest in this program. That is Germany, Russia, and Lithuania. And for the next year, we are looking for, or ministry is trying to have approximately 10 scholarships for the young researchers and students in the Baltic State region, allocating approximately 22,000 euros. As I already said, we have to improve our collaboration in infrastructures, and Lithuania, as well as the Baltic Sea region states, we invested a lot in building infrastructures like this. And we see on the movie that the infrastructures in this region are expanding and becoming more expensive and expensive, more expensive and expensive, and we have to use it properly, I would say. There's a possibilities to cooperate, could be cooperation in strengthening the capacities of research policy coordination. At the same time, participation in the joint initiatives in the EU and European Economic Area research. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, well, it is very important for our academic communities that we started to participate in the project Baltic Research Fund as instrument for the European Economic Area. And as you probably know, the finances come from the Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. And of course, these finances and collaboration, certainly, they are very significant for this part of Baltic Sea region. So, ending up, I would like to express our highest gratitude for the leader partner in Hamburg, for the project to coordination and leading the path from formulation of idea to achievement of final result. I would also like to thank other BSN partner countries for their input and cooperation in the course of the project. And my wishes also go for the Baltic Science Network to become a sustainable reality for the Baltic Sea region, ensuring commitment to building a knowledge-based society in the context of geographical and, more importantly, functional proximity. Thank you.
Thank you for your very kind words and also for pointing out something very important that we actually can take on board during the first session, which is young research mobility, and to see how that can be further supported. So thank you for that. The third high-level opening remark is foreseen for Ms. Eva Kumpel. If you would like to, thank you so much.
So, hello again from my side. The Free and Hanseatic City of Hamburg very much appreciates the outcome of today's high-level meeting. The joint statement reflects well our state's own desire for further the cooperation in the Baltic Sea region, especially in the field of science. Hamburg declared its strategy on science cooperation in the Baltic Sea region in 2014 and continuously works towards finding innovative solutions and how to further cooperation in this multi-level governance system. This is why we have been a driving force in establishment of the Baltic Science Network. We are well aware of the fact that fostering excellence excellent science and research in the region is key to a sustainable and prosperous region. With the outstanding research infrastructure, of course we've seen it in the film, and world-class higher education institutions of our state, the city of Hamburg is eager to contribute to developing a knowledge-based society in the region. And in this context, I would like to stress the importance of mobility, as you've said it before, of mobility of scientists and researchers in the region as well, because we need to find ways to mitigate the brain drain, as we mentioned in our meeting before. Research infrastructures are only as good as the scientists who work in them, and we need to find ways to keep and to attract talents to the BSR. And I'm sure you are all aware of that. Therefore, we are especially proud of the mobility tools developed by BSN, and we are glad that several CBSS members have already committed to support this tool. I'm really glad of that. These tools, which are tailor-made for the needs of the region, is a satisfying example on how to cater for the varying interests and possibilities of engagement of such a unique set of partners. And I would like to say at the end of my statement that the joint statement of the higher level meeting today reflect the region's willingness to further science cooperation, and the Free and Hanseatic City of Hamburg is looking forward to contributing to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And it's very clear that mobility is really seen as the foundation for this kind of transnational collaboration. And I want to keep you awake as well, of course. So do you see mobility as the foundation for transnational collaboration? If you just put up your hands for yes. Okay, I still think that needs a little bit of work, but luckily we have a great deal of speakers later on that can definitely convince you, I'm sure of it. Okay, I'd like to now continue with the next speaker, and that's Anders Ødegaard. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you very much for this opportunity to help kick off the final Baltic Sea Science Network conference. I'm very happy to take part today on behalf of Denmark. I will try not to be overly repetitive in terms of what my colleagues have already said for this opening session. And also I will try not to preempt the interesting discussions of today's later sessions on mobility, shared area of excellence, and widening participation in the European research area. So I hope you will allow me to focus only on part of the interventions at the CBS high-level meeting earlier this morning. As many of you will know, Denmark has been partner in the Baltic Science Network since its beginning in 2016. Specifically, the Danish Agency for Science and Higher Education, DAFSI, under the Ministry of Higher Education and Science, and even more specifically, DAFSI's Department for EU Collaboration and the EU Framework Program Horizon 2020. Our decision to join the Baltic Science Network was based on 3 issues. Firstly, to help support the pursuit of enhanced research cooperation in the Baltic Sea region. The Danish government fully supports the CBSS agenda to achieve sustainable and prosperous Baltic Sea region, and this cannot be done without focusing on research and innovation. Secondly, to be part of a new multi-level governance network and learn more from our neighbors in the Baltic. And thirdly, to work together to find ways in which our macro-regional perspective can help implement the European research area as such. And allow me to dwell on this last point, which has also been the backbone of my and the Danish intervention earlier today at the high-level meeting. During the Baltic Science Network project period, we have been looking closer into the perceived challenges and obstacles to enhanced research cooperation. And we have probably not been terribly surprised by the results. Our stakeholders have pointed to issues like administrative burdens, a lack of a clear pathway through the program jungle, and strategic coordination of research agendas. So in our quest to find ways to enhance research cooperation among the member states of our region, we must ask ourselves how best to overcome these challenges. How do we best facilitate the most excellent transnational research without overly burdensome administrative requirements? How do we make sure our researchers have clear perspective of where to start? And how can we best improve strategic coordination across countries, policies, institutions, and research themes? As I underlined this morning, these macro-regional challenges and questions are exactly the same as the challenges and questions of Europe as such. The Baltic Sea region is in many ways a small-scale mirror of Europe as such. And this brings me back to making the argument that the solutions of our region should be the solutions provided to us as Europeans as such. We, all of us here, like what we do. And it is tempting to come up with new ideas for new instruments to help solve the Baltic Sea regional challenge. But as we have stressed along the way of this project, we already have access to the world's largest framework program for research and innovation, Horizon 2020, and in 2 years' time, Horizon Europe. Also, Nordforsk is a well-established potential tool for transnational projects, and not only for the Nordic countries. The European Framework Program attempts to tackle exactly the challenges relating to excellence, mobility, research infrastructures, widening and international cooperation with non-EU members that we have been working with within the Baltic Science Network. No program is perfect, and the Framework Program is a work in progress, that is clear. But as we see it, the Framework Program and better use of the Framework Program can help enhance research cooperation across our own region. Creating coherence and establishing collaboration from scratch is far more demanding and often less fruitful than stimulating already established networks. As the Danish representative at this morning's CBSS high-level meeting, I'm happy that this perspective is reflected in the joint statement. The members of the Council of the Baltic Sea States agree, and I quote, "The world's largest framework for transnational research cooperation, Horizon 2020, alongside other existing BSR-wide networks, provide a multitude of opportunities for cross-sectoral cooperation," unquote. So the question remains how? How can we, as authorities, as institutions, as programs, as clusters, how can each of us contribute to making the European-wide tools work for the benefit of our region? I think we, each of us, would have a set of answers corresponding naturally to our day-to-day responsibilities and experiences. I myself represent a government body, DAFSHI, and the department in charge of guiding our stakeholders to the use of the EU Framework Program. This work basically consists of continuing to fine-tune the strategy of how to best get our stakeholders to participate. And obviously, this work takes place in close coordination with our institutions and organizations. But this work is not a closed national circuit, of course. Talking to our colleagues and stakeholders across and beyond the Baltic Sea region and exchanging best practices is key. The Baltic Science Network has been very interesting for this reason. And it is our hope and expectation that this dialogue will continue to take place, both for a more general an overall perspective in the CBSS with reference to its science, research and innovation agenda, and more specifically, among the participants in the flagships and projects of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, as well, of course, in the communities and working group of Europe as such. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Ødegaard, and also for putting what is being done in the BSN in a much broader perspective, basically being we are all Europeans, we all work together within this program called Horizon 2020, and indeed the future also offers tons of opportunities for participation. So thank you for that. Next up is Mr. Boris Zelezov. Thank you so much, and I've got the pointer here for you. There you go.
Well, good afternoon. This is my really honor and pleasure to be here and say a word of greetings to participants of this conference. I'd like first to mention that CBSS is especially mentioned in the concept of foreign policy of the Russian Federation as a partnership organization. And today morning, as it was already mentioned, we approved the comprehensive statement paving paths for the further cooperation. So this conference is titled as final, but I believe that continuation is unavoidable. And before wishing you all further success, I also want to mention another thing, that sometimes bureaucrats and scientists have something similar, and this is love to statistics. So I'm going to share with you some statistical data related to mobility of Russia with its CBSS partners. So what shall I press to?
You just have to point it, actually.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
there you go.
fine.
And you have to point it over there. It doesn't work at the screens. Yes.
It is there. Okay. Great. So it will not take much time, just 3 slides. So these are research projects with Russian participation, supported from 2014 with all countries participating in CBSS. So you see that the number, of course, is different, and Germany is the biggest, has taken the biggest share. But anyway, we see that multilateral projects also exist, and our cooperation has potential for development. Another thing is student mobility. This is official data from our ministry. It covers mobility. It is not about the full-time fellowships Russian Federation provides for international students. So the short-term means that this is really short-term mobility lasting less than 1 month. But long-term mobility also exists, and it exists 1 or 2 terms. So you see that the numbers are also relatively significant, and we have joint mobility programs involving tens of Russian universities with their partners in CBSS countries. And the last statistical data derived from the Erasmus Plus representative office in Moscow, and this is about supported mobility with CBSS countries from the Erasmus Plus programs. So you see also there is a significant statistical data showing that we really established joint working networks providing opportunity for mobility. Yes, this is basically all statistics I'd like to share with you today. But again, I mean that we established this solid basis for further cooperation, and now I wish you success for the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. It's always nice to see a politician, him or herself, bridging the gap to scientists by providing these kind of statistics. Thank you so much. And then last but not least, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Sebastian Skuza. Thank you.
There are ministers, there are distinguished guests, there are ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you to Mrs. Minister Eva Gimbel for giving the inspiring insight into the Baltic Science Network. In 2016, Poland, as CBSS presidency, welcomed the proposal to establish and endorse the Baltic Science Network as a groundbreaking platform for future cooperation in the area of science policy in the Baltic Sea region. With it foreseen a substantial added value in closer cooperation and regular dialogue on science and higher education in the Baltic Sea region. I am deeply convinced that we can report today that those tasks have been completely fulfilled. It is well known that the Baltic Sea region offers a huge range of high-class universities and research institutes and active cooperation among science. Today, we also know that we have common platform for pushing forward joint initiatives, effective lobbying, and developing the Baltic dimensions of European research area, the Baltic Science Network. But nevertheless, the Baltic Sea region is challenged with different levels of science and innovation performance. Existing research and innovation facilities and infrastructures are not equally distributed and interconnected. There is a lot of room for improvement during the extension stage of the Baltic Science Network. I would like to mark a few issues in this regard. Overcoming the participation and innovation gap in the mutual interest not only for the new EU member states, but the whole Baltic Sea region. Poland appreciates the willingness of CBSS members to consider innovative measures for widening participation and hope that Horizon Europe will manage to balance itself between excellence and widening, which both are not exclusive. I am looking especially forward to the presentation and discussion of the Baltic Science Network Mobility Tool, which is an excellent example on how to encourage cooperation in the Baltic Sea region on a regular basis. The establishment of the Baltic Science Network was a great step forward in starting thinking in a macro-regional dimensions and to develop a macro-regional coordination framework for science policy. We need to think about the continuity, stability, and sustainability of the Baltic Science Network. In Poland, we're having a long-term experience with European Union strategy for the Baltic Sea region. I would like to endorse the idea to recommend the Baltic Science Network as new policy area or horizontal action area for science and research. The Baltic macroregion needs Baltic Science Network, and Baltic Science Network needs the Baltic macroregion. Have a good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and indeed we all need each other. Okay, well, we have done the high-level opening remarks, but we still have a little bit of time left. So I thought I'm just going to ask you all a final question, and it's actually quite straightforward, and you only have to answer with one sentence. Shouldn't be too hard, right? Okay. So let's give it a try, ladies and gentlemen. So my question to you is, where do you see the Baltic Science Network in 5 years from now? If I may start with you. One sentence. That's all I'm asking.
We have 4 regions in Europe, and I believe that our network will become the leading network in Europe.
Okay, thank you very much. A very ambitious goal, leading network.
Well, as I mentioned in my opening remark, I hope to see a network that is closely tied and with a view to what is happening in the rest of Europe.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I can only confirm that the leading position of the network together with other partners and associated members.
Thank you.
It will be the most important network in European Union and in Europe as well.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I like these ambitions. You have a lot of work to do, ladies and gentlemen. Yes?
So I think that a little bit like you have said. I think that we will be taken as a role model for the European Union.
Yes, it's certainly in 5 years must be already a role model that can be others can benefit from. But from our individual perspective, it certainly has to serve as an umbrella organization that actually ties together. Whether it is doable, it only depends on the countries that are part of the network and to what extent you use this potential and you participate in it. Yeah? At least we have already planned next project steps to take further. So just have to do it.
Okay, thank you very much. So, role model, leading position, and I think we definitely said goodbye to Sleeping Beauty now, right? Do you agree? Have we said goodbye to Sleeping Beauty? I think so. Very good. A big hand to these people. Thank you. Okay, you're more than welcome to take your seats again. Thank you for that. Okay, the audience, and now we are going to continue with the first session of today, and I think you've heard it already multiple times. Mobility, mobility, mobility. It's the key, it's a foundation to make this transnational collaboration work within the Baltic Sea region. So the session will be about mobility in higher education and research in the Baltic Sea region, and we will also discuss new concepts and ideas. So be prepared to allow for a lot of insights and ideas for innovations. And in order to kick off this session, it is my great pleasure to first ask Rita Mustonen, Director of Development of the University of Turku, to give an overview of the Baltic Science Network results. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to start this first session. But first, before we start, on behalf of all Baltic Science Network partners, I would really like to thank the distinguished high-level speakers for support and encouragement, what they presented. So thank you. So I'm coming from the University of Turku, and the University of Turku was responsible for running the work package related to mobility. One slide is probably missing now, I see, but I can speak it. So, Baltic Science Network started a few years ago, and now we are coming to the end. And what is Baltic Science Network? As you know, it's a network for ministries, agencies, and universities from the Baltic Sea region. It was established to explore how to integrate macro-regional interests into science policy on the EU, national, regional, and local levels. And as you can guess, this is a very broad area, and we needed to focus on something. And our focus was to go to main actions like widening participation, Baltic Sea region-wide mobility, research and innovation excellence, exchange and learning of best practices, and of course one of the main issues was also how to lobby on EU and international level. These are the members, so you can see that the network was really broad. And it is a policy network gathering relevant transnational, national and regional policy actors from BSR countries. you can see that we have members not only from countries but also Baltic Sea region like Nordforsk and Bonus and so on. So we believe that this was a very efficient network to discuss these quite challenging issues as well. Then going to mobility. Why is mobility important? We know that mobility is beneficial for students and researchers. There is evidence that mobility can build the international networks. Definitively, mobility develop researchers and students' own careers. And of course, it is important that when the mobility increases, students and researchers can collaborate internationally. We, for example, know that those researchers who have been mobile in their career are more competitive when they are applying funding, international, very competitive funding sources. So definitively mobility is important for them. But mobility is also very beneficial to research. There is evidence that internationally collaborative research papers are more highly cited than papers published by authors of the same nation. We can summarize that mobility strengthens the circulation of skills and ideas. So how we worked with this mobility issue? Baltic Science Network, as a Baltic Science Network, we wanted to identify first the challenges in mobility in this region, and there is a report on this. Then we studied how the existing mobility tools respond to those challenges. And we have a report also to that. And then we drafted proposals for new mobility tools in Baltic Sea region. Even though we know that mobility should be beneficial, not only for researchers, but research itself, this is not the reality. We have challenges, we have obstacles, there are really problems. One issue is that mobility is, or Baltic Sea region is not a priority region what comes to the researcher mobility here. So mobility goes from east to west. We have a problem also in brain drain, and there is also a problem of support measures, not only in general measures in different countries, but there aren't really targeted mobility measures and tools for researchers in this area. We have studied the mobility tools. We found that there are altogether almost 90 different ways or tools which can be used, but those are not really beneficial in this area. Only few tools are designed with direct focus on Baltic Sea region, and most of the tools are rather small scale. They are not available for everyone. And what is most important, researchers and young students, they don't know about them. So awareness is very low. So summary is that existing mobility tools do not solve these challenges. Basically, what we understood was that challenges can be solved only with the effective mobility tools. Therefore, Baltic Science Network proposes 3 mobility tools: summer schools for large-scale research infrastructures, research internships, and short-term scholarships for PhD students. Since there are naturally plenty of different kind of possibilities how to proceed, we decided to focus on those which are beneficial for young researchers, and also we decided that we need to focus on those issues that support excellence, transparency, and continuity. So we used those as guiding principles. And now our goal as Baltic Science Network is to really search for funding opportunities and try to figure out how to proceed with the funding in the future in order to get these mobility tools in practice. Now I'll go very briefly through these suggested tools. First, summer schools for large research infrastructures. Here the idea is to support to large-scale research infrastructures to arrange summer schools. This is meant for PhD students, and here Baltic Sea region is in focus. We believe that this can be beneficial for both students and researchers by giving experience from large research infrastructures, which is very important and valuable, and in many cases also providing opportunities to reach those infrastructures which are not available at home. Benefits also for research infrastructures. We know that these large research infrastructures are very expensive. They are very sophisticated. And it is important that we use more efficiently these infrastructures. So it is important to widen the pool of the users. That's why we decided that this would be one of our suggestions. The second tool is research internships. Here the idea is that doctoral students host master students in their research projects. This could be internship period for 1 to 3 months. And both, master student and the doctoral student would have a joint research project, which is of mutual interest. Here we took the lessons learned and experience from the German funder DART. So basically this proposal is built on that instrument, what is already used, and as far as we understand, there is a lot of good experience of it. And also we believe that this mobility tool could be beneficial for research itself, because it means that there will be more resources and also maybe potential future resource to the topic, if the topic is of interest also to master student. Our third tool is short-term scholarship for PhD students. And this is for PhD students, again, 1 to 3 months. And as you can see, I believe, or we believe, actually, our group, that these kind of short-term scholarships could be beneficial for students and researchers, because they could create new international contacts. Also, they can bring new personal networks, and also they will increase competence, skills, and of course confidence. And net research itself would also get benefit of new scientific networks, and of course it will increase the impact of research. Our lessons learned from this work package is that Baltic Sea region needs more powerful researcher mobility. If we are able to do this, we get definitively added value. What we can achieve is that we can boost research in this macro region, we can build stronger networks for the future, and we can pool research resources for scientific discoveries. We believe that we need to raise awareness of opportunities that Baltic Sea region can offer. Because we have here state-of-the-art equipment, and we have top researchers and teams. And last but not least, we have short distances. Probably it is so that geographical closeness and thus cooperation in macro region will become more and more important in the future when we are forced to think of sustainable development and climate change. So maybe the importance and impact of cooperation in this macro region will also increase by that way. So this is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I may ask you to take a seat
Yes.
on the stage. Thank you for that. I think you very clearly already pointed out, we need to stimulate skills, we need to stimulate ideas, and you have many ideas to do so. And I think it's very helpful that we got an overview of the existing gaps, and with the newly proposed mobility tools, we actually might be able to mitigate these kind of gaps. So what we're going to do now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to invite some other panelists on the stage so that we can further discuss the topic of mobility for higher education and research. So it is my great pleasure to also ask Gintaras Valincius, Director of the Vilnius University Life Sciences Center, to join me on stage as well. Sandra Krase from the European Association of Institutions in Higher Education, EUROSCE. Christian Müller, Deputy General Secretary of the German Academic Exchange Service, DAAT. And finally, Enili Kindziko, Lecturer of the University of Tartu. Thank you very much. And I suggest that we all remain seated for this session. And as I've already informed you, it would be great if you can just give a small introduction to your organization's involvement in mobility programs, and to also point out to you, the audience, what you think are the programs and activities that in general work best to support mobility for the Baltic Sea region. Do note, I give you a max of 2 minutes, and I'm very strict on that. Okay, thank you very much. If I may start with Mr. Valincius.
Good afternoon. So I'm the director of the Life Sciences Center at Vilnius University, and we are leading a research and studies institution operating in biomedical research field, and of course we're involved in biotechnology development, pharmaceutical science. Life Sciences Center is, as you saw from that short movie, is actually very well known for the discoveries in the gene editing tools, which were developed by one of our prominent professors, Virginijus Šikšnys, who was awarded $1 million prize last year in the capital of Norway, Oslo, the Kavli Prize, and we really value international exchange and international mobility. International mobility actually is included into our strategic development plan, and we see international mobility as one of the major contributors towards high quality science at the Life Sciences Center, development of needed currently absent expertises, competences, and skills, and of course access to the unique instruments and large scale infrastructure. It's very easy for us to see that the mobility and these issues which I mentioned, it can be easily translated into the competitiveness, increased competitiveness of organization and increased financial finances. Excellence in science increase our international visibility. That means that we are more easily competing for the grant money. New expertise gives us a competitive edge because, if you have more knowledge, more skills, people are coming to Vilnius, and of course we are more easily included into international research teams. And access to large-scale infrastructure creates competitive edge, strengthens human potential, and of course gives us more international visibility and ties with the researchers in other countries. So, summarizing, we can claim that international mobility is beneficial for the organization. At the end of the day, we invest in it, and we see the increase of finances. And possibly increase in new people coming to our institution.
Thank you. That was 1 minute and 58 seconds. Well done, you. Ms. Krase.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I welcome you all here in this event. I will speak from two perspectives. As a School of Business and Finance as being the member of EURASHI, and EURASHI is an active Bologna process player, one of the BFUG group members, which actively participated in developing Bologna process mobility tools and involves mostly and deals with the universities of applied sciences, professional employability issues, social dimensions, and of course these mobility tools that traditionally through Erasmus program appeared have given a huge benefit for mobility of not only bachelor students but also master students and as well as doctoral students. The benefit of this also could be seen if I give an example from the School of Business and Finance, where I myself come from, so that we've set up one of the first business management study programs, which was an inter-university program in 2006, just after Bergen 2005, when the 3-cycle programs and university education and science has been much more emphasized and has to be closer to practical needs of society and economics. So today I would say that universities of applied science can be proud of also, and especially due to Bologna process, that we had the opportunity to receive doctoral students from India, from Uzbekistan, from Lithuania, from many countries, and that means not only they did their research and defended the colleagues from Germany in partnership with Kaiserslautern University, and colleagues from Lithuania who also defended their PhD thesis and continue also working as academic staff. So where I see that really these kind of mobilities and full-time studies and as well created contacts on a personal basis, and currently also we have a colleague from Lithuania who also is involved as foreign academic staff. So that means new opportunities for various other projects. Apart from that, also as together with DAD and Campus France and British Council, so because of the success of the Bologna process, we as European universities and European associations support Southeast Asia new mobility programs and credit mobilities, so transparency models and recognition models. Just a month ago, we finished a 3-year program.
Sorry, your 2 minutes are almost up.
So that means we are a big player, I would say, on mobility.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Müller.
Thank you.
And Ms. Krase, sorry, if you can switch off your microphone, thank you.
Inviting me. I'm representing DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Service. Basically what we do is academic mobility, very basically. And for 92 years, if I'm not wrong, more or less, 93 years. So it is the flagship of our work is to give scholarships, to provide opportunities to go abroad, for Germans to go abroad, to do studies and to do research, for foreigners to come to Germany, and in multilateral settings to move around in academic qualification, academic work, research work. So basically what we do is exactly that, believing that mobility is a very important thing to do if your objective is to bring scientific societies together to build on cooperation, to build on different settings of research frameworks. And in this sense, I think we have seen for the last years that mobility is changing in different ways. I'm coming back to this later. And specifically, our feeling is that regional mobility is a very important trend, not only here. And so I believe very strongly that regional mobility in this geographical macro region, Baltic Sea, is a very good start to do if you're looking on stronger academic ties, stronger scientific collaboration, and these outcomes. Obviously, you need a system for that, you need structures, you need tools, and you need financiation. So you need money. I think we will come back to that later. And at the end of this, what you need is a system of rewarding. Specifically, if you look on students, when they go abroad, they need an acknowledgement, they need a revalidation of their foreign studies. And this is my 2 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you for keeping the time yourself.
So this is exactly what we need to look into. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then finally, the floor is for Ms. Kinsinko.
Good afternoon to everybody. I am very thankful for my colleague to summing up why mobility is very important. I am an academic person myself. I'm a lecturer. I'm considering myself as a junior academic since I'm a lecturer and I finished my PhD. Over here I'm representing, in a way, Estonia, Tartu University. I'm from management field originally, and I was listening to these talks and I really like that we are talking about mobility, and from my perspective I'm seeing that it's totally true that I know much more about UK, US, even Asia than I know about Latvia, Lithuania, our neighbors, in terms of mobility. So I think this regional perspective is really important when we turn our paradigm, what we think when we think about mobility. Is it something that is far away, or is it something that is next door? Honestly, I have more colleagues probably from UK than I know from Riga, and that is my misfortune, I would say. So I hope this network will help to benefit this flow, at least in my field.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll touch upon that later as well, because that's very much a question of creating awareness of the different tools that are out there instead of the usual programs that you know that have been advertised everywhere. So thank you for those points. If I may start with Mr. Müller, you just mentioned mobility itself is actually changing. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, of course, I would love to do so. We, as I said, we work with scholarship schemes, scholarship programs. We work also with programs in which we give money to universities. So in order that the universities themselves, the institutions, can build projects of international academic cooperation. So this is the second strand. The third strand is, what is important for us, is to build expertise, knowledge on how international academic exchange and collaboration is evolving, changing, how different scientific systems are working. Inside this point and this strand of knowledge, we also look on numbers of international mobility, exchange, and so on. You must have seen our study 2 years ago on mobility in the Baltic Sea region, which was, if I'm not wrong, the first exercise in this matter. So this is the kind of things we also do. What we find out is, looking on the numbers worldwide, that really there are changings, there are changes, there are trends.
So what are
one
these,
trend
what are
would
these
be
changes? Yes. Thank
one
you.
trend would be that if we look on German students and young academics going abroad, it seems that the numbers are not rising that easily and that steadily. It is more or less flattening. So we reach a level of outbound mobility, which means that if we reach on 35, 38, 40% of our students who go abroad, that might be a natural boundary, which is very, very difficult to overcome. If we look on inbound mobility, definitely many things are changing. If you look on China, Australia, if you look on Singapore and so on, Korea, so many things are changing very dramatically. What is interesting to say, this is why I mentioned the issue of regional mobility. We see that worldwide, specific regions are evolving in terms of intra-regional mobility. If you take Malaysia and the countries surrounding Malaysia, that's a very clear case, or the United Arab Emirates, another case. So there you see, or US and Canada, there you see that for many reasons it seems to be easier for somebody to go, say, from Finland to Germany or from Sweden to Latvia than from Sweden to Malaysia. For many reasons, and some of these reasons have to do with costs, with a feeling of safety, of security, or with language issues, or even with the question of academic freedom and freedom of sciences, or even cultural distances or cultural easiness with which you would travel abroad. So I think that there is a trend and there's a future for regional, intra-regional academic mobility.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, within this context, if you would want to facilitate this kind of regional mobility, some new kind of tools are needed. But for that, you first need to identify the different gaps. And I'd like to also come back to Mr. Valentius, because you have been one of the authors of this first report in 2017 on the challenges to research mobility. And as you've heard, and as you know from your colleague, Ms. Mustonen, she already touched on some of the obstacles being from east to west, brain drain, it's not a priority region. Are there any other obstacles that you have identified that we need to be aware of?
Well, you're right. Actually, I was leading a group who organized in 2017 survey, which included 1,300 researchers and approximately 300 administrators from various levels of administrators, from ministries, from funds, and institutions. Well, this is a rather big survey, but the point which was emphasized by my colleague Rita is that many researchers, surveyed researchers, they don't see Baltic region as a priority region for the mobility, and this is probably quite natural because science nowadays is rather international endeavor, and we travel everywhere, distances shortened. But of course, as a region which has high aspirations with regard to competitiveness in the world, we need to think about this issue and think whether or not there are some ways how to change the perception. Of course, we cannot order change. We can only facilitate or maybe somehow catalyze this change. And I would like to resonate a little bit, kind of support my colleague from DAAD that these days the mobility schemes actually are transforming. And speaking about our institutional life sciences center, first of all, classical way of getting involved in research programs abroad in the mobility programs is that someone, PhD student or scientist, is applying with a fund or agency for money. Then she or he gets money and travels and works abroad. But we decided that why not to think about some kind of other approach at the institution. And we decided to establish what we call twin labs. So first, we designed the project, which involves the guy who spoke in that movie, speaking about epigenetics regulation of diseases markers. And we designed a project which involves a team in Canada, Toronto University Medical School, and another team at the Life Sciences Center in Vilnius. And our university administration said, you know, this is really, sounds like a good project. We will give you for 2 years 150,000 euros just to initiate the project, but on the condition that we will be exchanging students. Canadians will be coming here, and Lithuanians will go, you know, overseas, you know, getting some new experience, new expertise, skills, working with data, with patient data, and things like that. So this project started, and we already have, you know, a lot of, you know, exchanges between those two countries, those two labs.
And this comes back a little bit again to what you mentioned previously, UK, US, Canada. So do you see it possible, Mr. Valincius, that this can also be happening in a collaboration in the Baltic Sea region?
So my point is that we should think about, you know, bilateral agreements at the institutional levels. The funds are good because they are very rich. They could give you big money. Okay, agencies and ministers are good because, but institutions are flexible, very flexible. They could do things very fast. They are predictable and stable. For example, in Lithuania, sometimes we have some problems with the stability of the funding. 1 year you have program, another year you don't have program. But at the institution, we are stable. Of course, we have limited funds. So that's the idea is that within the Baltic Sea region, we can establish twin labs or some other entities which would collaborate on the projects, including projects which involve, you know, large-scale infrastructures. And these projects will include, you know, some kind of a supplementary grants, travel grants for young people to go from one lab to another one.
Okay, thank you for this contribution. So we can add another tool to the mix, twin labs. Very good. Then I'd like to come back to Ms. Kinsiko. Can you share with us your own personal experience as having been an exchange student and you've come back to your country and the kind of trends that you also see within the students that you're lecturing? Thank you.
Yeah, I can say that during my PhD studies, I spent many months abroad. And as I continued in academic career, I've used probably, I think, most of the schemas that are out there, because I think there's a correlation. If you are mobile during your PhD studies, you tend to be more mobile also after that. So it's like an addiction. When it starts, you cannot stop it, usually.
So where are you off next?
I'm going to UK.
Okay. You see. Well, I've heard that the Baltic Sea region offers really wonderful institutions and places where you can be mobile as well.
But I would bring actually one experience that for me, I had to redefine what does it mean to be mobile during a junior period, because this is like incubation period. This is not endless period. It means that you have to use this period to maximum to build a network, because after that there is a great downfall. Of course, you will lose some money or this kind of support. So how will you fly after that? So I think if you haven't been able to build this network, you might be very, I would say, very sad during your mid-career phase. So I think that is a question we have to address. Is the mobility after junior level, is it depending only on money or something else? I think these kind of flexible schemas that you bring in students, that might help actually. You bring new knowledge without actually going abroad yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would like to address the question of how do you overcome the transformation from junior level to the mid level?
Yeah. Okay. I think we can tackle that one straight away, because the junior mid-level, indeed, it is one of the obstacles, as has also been pointed out during one of the high-level opening remarks. The younger research mobility seems to be a kind of a caveat within the broader context of mobility frameworks. So who can comment on that question? From young researcher to mid-level researcher and the mobility opportunities. Yes, Mr. Müller.
I mean, at first hand, I would say, what does this tell us? It tells us that if we look on mobility tools, we need to concentrate on very young people, on students, on master students, on PhD students, young postdocs. As you said, after that there will be a transition to a certain stability of life, of family, whatever, and in which you will be less mobile maybe, or not on short notice. I think this is what I would draw from it. And if you manage to acquaint young people with a certain knowledge and a familiarity with other countries, other scientific systems, other languages, then they will build on that in their future life as having a network to researchers in many countries or specific institutions. So I think we need to look on this, on students, PhD students, young postdocs. If we look on short-term mobility, and as Mrs. Mustonen has already explained, these tools which have been defined, they look on short-term stays abroad, they look on younger generations, and I think these two dimensions should be observed. Maybe we should even add another one, which would be that the question of inclusion and diversity has to enter there as well.
Okay, thank you. So the sooner the start, the better. Ms. Mustonen.
I think that we need not only instruments, we need to also facilitate the culture change so that young students and young researchers would be more willing to take the chance and try their wings and really try to go. So there is also this kind of culture change we need to take care of.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps we can also ask you, the audience, have you had a mobility exchange in your professional career or as a student? Just put your hands up if you have. Okay, that looks pretty good. Thank you for that. Well, it's good to see that at least from the audience side as well, we have some like-minded people, and those who haven't been yet or perhaps haven't had the opportunity, then there's still a chance for sure to do so. I'd like to also engage you right now, the audience, before we will continue with some other questions. So is there a question from your side? And then I'd like to have a microphone. Thank you. So I've got one question over here, up front, and then afterwards, that gentleman. Yes, there's the microphone. If you can just please state your name and affiliation. Thank you.
Hello, I'm from Riga, local, from State Education Development Agency. We are also handling a number of exchange programs. But I had a question to the distinguished guests, to the excellent panel. You know, already Mr. Müller mentioned that we are not alone, Europe, in the world, so there are other regions. And if you look in the future, I think it's probably even more, important question to ask, why not students from Malaysia, United Arab Emirates, or Brazil? They would, there's this lure of US and UK, and Estonian colleague also, she will travel to UK. I've been to UK for 5 years as a PhD student. It's not that they have much better universities, but they're much better positioned in the market of education. So, and here we come to the question, it's nice to call Baltic region a sleeping beauty or awakened beauty or beauty waiting for enlightenment, but, can we position Baltic region as something in international stage, As for Germany, it presents no problem, Germany has BMW and Mercedes and it needs no explanation. But for smaller countries in this region, Latvia cannot make an international profile. That's simply impossible, a high profile, I mean. So Baltic region, regions that speaks English language, regions that is welcome to all cultures, open-minded. Besides German trademark, which is already valid trademark all over the world, maybe you can also join for making Baltic trademark, which would be, like this region.
So your question is about how to market the region?
Baltic trademark in development of, university,
Okay.
our place in global world, not just Europe.
Okay, thank you very much. Who would like to take this question? Ms. Krase.
Thank you for the question. I would a little bit contradict you. I would say that Baltic region is succeeding in marketing its opportunities exporting its study opportunities and attracting researchers and students from, especially from Southeast Asia, I would say. As an example, I could give also my BA School of Business and Finance that we have strategic partnership agreements with Thailand, with Malaysia, and within the internal grant system research project together with colleagues from Malaysia. So that means I would say that thanks to other projects which were started a couple of years ago, namely I would like to mention SHARE project where DRD has also successfully participated, so that opened up more opportunities for different regions in Europe and set up new cooperation opportunities. As well as I would like to stress that cooperation within the Baltic countries, Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia are growing in terms of joint projects, making use of Erasmus Plus partnership projects. Also, we had a fantastic project which was flagged by European Commission as a flagship project for industries, for insurance companies, in risk management, let's say, tools. And this is the applied research that I think researchers can contribute to the economic development, social dimensions, and we are on the right path, and there are signs, but of course always we might be more attractive as well, but we are getting more interesting to the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you for that. And Ms. Moestone, if I'm not mistaken, there was one mobility tool you didn't select, and that was a BSR ambassador. And I think you just found yourself an ambassador, Ms. Krase, because she knows well how to market the region. Any other views from the panel on the question that was just, yeah, Mr. Valentius?
Yeah, thank you very much. So since the word marketing surfaced, of course, we should think about how to do this. You can spend money on marketing and get nothing, and you can, of course, get a very good result. And I don't know how this could be done at the level of the country or at the level of the region. I never had experience, managing that big, funds, marketing funds. But speaking about institution level, of course, many universities, including our university and our center, we think about this, and we arrange various programs, study programs, research programs, and we work very actively with our ambassadors, with the Foreign Office of Lithuania. But I would like to stress one thing, which we discussed many times with my colleague Rita during the sessions, that it would be nice to deliver the message to the students in the world, in the third countries which are not the part of European Union, that once you get to any university in the Baltic Sea region, that all doors in the Baltic Sea region institutions are open for you.
So you're thinking about a kind of like a local regional mobility passport?
Well, I mean that, once, student got admitted to the PhD program, to the University of Tartu or to the University of Vilnius, whatever, all facilities across Baltic Sea region are open in terms of he or she will have funds to travel for both short-term projects and longer-term projects and whatever is necessary to successfully complete the PhD project or postdoc project. I don't know how to do, but it's probably worth thinking about.
Okay, well, we're here in this session to come up with new concepts and ideas, so this is much appreciated. Thank you for that. Anyone else who would like to comment on the question? Yes.
I can come in this, and there's a famous quote from Henry Ford who used to say, out of $2 I spent on marketing, one is thrown away, if I only knew which one of both. So you never know. You put money in it, you never know what is working, what is not working. I've been working in marketing for education for quite a while. And the discussion we always had is where do brands work? Which brand works? Like, for instance, Harvard is a brand. It works. Harvard doesn't do marketing for studying in Harvard. They don't do it. They don't need it. But if you take the university level, then you have the level of, say, a land like Hamburg or Bavaria. Study in Bavaria is a brand. Does it work? I don't know. Then you have a country, you have a region, you have Europe. So study in Europe is being experienced to build as a brand. And just to mention that, I would propose, if you want to think about that, there are international communication campaigns and education fairs and so on, study in Europe, in which we could participate as Baltic Sea region. You can do that. Maybe that's the $1 which is thrown away. Maybe it's the $1 which is worth the effort. Just try and do it and see what comes out. I think it is worth the effort to try to establish a brand and give an image of what that means.
So we actually need a little bit more of Nike. Just do it.
Yeah, just do it.
Exactly. Okay, Ms. Mustonen, and then I'll take the next question. Yes.
Maybe we should not forget that excellent research is the best way to market. So I think that one issue is to do good collaborative research. That's the way how this area can be known.
Okay.
And that's the best way to market.
Okay, thank you very much. So have your decent quality base, and that's the way to market it. Yes, if you can please state your name and affiliation.
Absolutely. My name is Grigory Roshkov, St. Petersburg. I'm director of the Russian-Finnish Life Science Center at the Pharma University. And my question is, we work closely with Rita and her colleagues and try to establish contacts with Gintaras. My question is to the panelists, is Russia still in your priority? Because we send application to DAD, we try different efforts with German companies, so we need to know here. That's why we're invited. And I have my colleague, Maria Poveda, speaking tomorrow about the mobility. What do we have already in St. Petersburg? So it will be interesting to hear what you have in mind.
Okay, thank you very much.
So because we understand mobility is not an advanced ticket office, it's more than that.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a means to an end. We would like to respond to that. Yes, Mr. Vinicius.
Well, surely, because Gregorius is a friend of mine, so I should, respond clearly and openly that definitely Russia is a part of Baltic Sea region, and we really appreciate, all the incentives which are coming from St. Petersburg area, and I believe, Russia was always, a huge pool of talented people who contributed immensely to the science, to the technology development in the world, and I believe that the future is I believe Russia will be and is a part of Europe and part of Baltic Sea.
Thank you. That's a big yes. Ms. Graze.
Yeah, I would like to confirm that we actively participate within Erasmus+, where also Russian universities are in partnership, and last academic semester our School of Business and Finance accepted both on a one semester term, 3 students and academic staff members. So we also applied for the next period, so in cooperation with partners. So that means we do projects together, yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who would like to respond? Okay, if not, I think Ms. Mustonen wanted to take the floor. Yeah.
Just a short comment. Of course, the mobility goes both ways, and of course, Russia is important. And as my colleague Quintara said, talented people are the key question, key issue, and also excellent research. And that can happen wherever. So definitively, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to continue with another question, perhaps also for Mr. Müller. You already talked about changing mobility flows, and how can one actually fix an unbalanced mobility flow? Is there a kind of a solution for that? Because you've already just mentioned for German outward mobility, it kind of stagnated, remained on the same level. But how can you incentivize making sure that more mobility will take place?
Well, if we look on some examples, obviously each case is a case. And if we look on the US, for instance, the exchange with the United States is very imbalanced in the sense that many Germans go there and very few Americans come to Germany. So this has a couple of reasons. And now that we see that the number of Americans coming to Germany is increasing, students, for instance, students looking, studying for a degree, coming for a degree, this is something which is very difficult to change or to do an impulse on it or to change it. This is simply due to the fact that higher education studies in the US are becoming so expensive that American students look for other opportunities. So we didn't influence this. This is just a change of the landscape in the US. In my opinion, the tuition fees in American universities in some cases are absolutely astronomically and nuts in a sense. So American students are looking for other opportunities. Other cases are very different, like the case between Germany and Egypt, for instance, where we have very many Egyptian students in Germany and few German students going there. But how can you influence that? How can you change that? Basically, if you establish exchange schemes on equal footing and with financiation for both parts in more or less the same dimension, that depends obviously on the willingness of the other partners to go with us and to come in with funding themselves, which is the case of Egypt. For instance, the government of Egypt invests quite a lot in mobility to Europe and mobility to Germany. And so there we can collaborate on bilateral agreements and bilateral funding schemes, and that works. And then you get a certain balance in the mobility.
Okay.
So regional scope obviously is more complicated.
Exactly. So you need a kind of like equal partnership to be able to make that happen. Okay. We've talked a little bit about awareness, but I think we can promote that even a bit more. If I might like to come back to you, Ms. Mustonen. So you have identified 3 different mobility tools. How are you going to create awareness so that also your colleagues here at the table, in the room, their students, will be able to make full use of those mobility tools?
That's a good question. We had one mobility tool, a proposal for that, where we talk about the PSR mobility ambassadors. But we realized that if we propose this, we should have more like commitments in the administrative side, because we understand that one of the main problems is that young students are not really aware of all those opportunities there might be. And but it's not only probably awareness, it's also the attraction. But awareness, they are kind of linked together. So we were discussing of some kind of internet pages or some kind of platform where all these possibilities would be, but that would create another problem. Who would take care of that? Who would update it? Who would be responsible for that, and so on. So this is definitively something what we need to come back when we have first checked this pilot thing and these first 3 proposals.
Okay.
How to improve that.
Thank you so much. Let me also ask the youngster in this panel, Ms. Kinsiko. Do you perhaps have some ideas? I don't know, social media, using Instagram, use a vlogger to promote mobility tools?
Actually, I have a very good suggestion that usually the PhD student is not in isolation. He or she has a supervisor, research group, so I think that is the main target you should communicate it to. It's not only administrative people, but if your supervisor says that she or he is not mobile, him or herself, then that's where leading your way to not being mobile also among your PhD students. Okay. So I think that if your supervisor says that you should go abroad, should meet other people, you should participate conferences, workshop, etc., think that's leading by your example. I think that is the way we should communicate this. Because I got my ideas from my supervisor. She told me basically that, okay, I don't know about everything, but I know people who know what you need to know. So I went there, who knows something, what I needed to know. So I think that's the way to do it, usually.
So just asking, you'll find the right person.
People, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know, for example, how does your Russia accommodate that? Awareness, attraction?
Yes, I would say that through practical things and joint publications. So that this is one of the most successful ways, and jointly seeking participations in different projects, and also Eurasia organizes annual international conferences where we invite partners, and now for short pitch presentations on their best practices. That's a huge opportunity to learn about new things. Last year we had the Eurasia conference in Tallinn, so the major topic was digitalization. So, and of course all these issues that come up today, and I coming from myself from a business school, so we have really set a very important task to make sure that our students know about new business models, platform-based companies, design thinking and digital disruptions and creative disruptions and all these things, yeah? And these are interesting issues that come up and might bring benefit to new innovations and put young students together already at bachelor and master level. We have projects where bachelor students work in one project international with master students, engineering students in Belgium, for example. So these are the ways doing as many projects together as possible. That's my answer.
Thank you. So connecting them to the real world to see how theory and practice come together. Mr. Valentius, any experience from your Life Sciences Center?
Actually, I would agree that the bidirectional nature of mobility would be an ideal case for the Baltic Sea Network, but we should be realists. The mobility is related to the funding, and of course different Baltic Sea region countries have different capabilities. For example, I don't see any chances for Lithuania to compete with the city of Hamburg with regard to funds, which can be allocated for long-term projects, big grants. But speaking about small grants and speaking about different approaches, maybe innovative approaches, I see Lithuania quite competitive place. Even if we have partners in Germany, in Finland, or Denmark. So and the innovation should probably start at the institutional level. Institutions should somehow find ways to create conditions for the scientists, young PhD students, and create opportunities for them. And they should feel that if they need ever go somewhere to do some measurement or some study, the funds, small funds, initial funds, are available here and now. They must be very flexible. We know European schemes, and Erasmus probably is the most democratic and the most productive scheme. Marie Curie Action is very good program, but it's very highly competitive. You cannot expect 100% success rate at Marie Curie level. But at the institution where everyone knows who are good scientists and who are prospective scientists, every good scientist, every talent should know that whenever funds will be needed to go to European spallation source, Lithuania is not a member. So definitely we will need to pay for our folks going to and using instruments at the European spallation source. Or if there will be a necessity to go to the EMBL labs, to Hamburg Synchrotron, we can provide initial support. So that's the major factor for the young researcher to understand that we do care about him or her at the institution, and if necessary, to do something in terms of support of his or her travel, we are ready to do this anytime.
Very good. Thank you very much. I first like to take one or two questions from the audience, if there are any. Thank you very much. I've got two questions. We'll start in the back over there, and then we're going to wrap it up with a final question on the funding, because I think that's the big elephant in the room, always, no matter what you discuss. Your name, please.
Uwe Sassenberg, coming from DESY, one of the large-scale research infrastructures already mentioned. I heavily support the idea of mobility. We have even one former colleague, a former PhD, that met his wife on a summer school in the Baltic Sea area. He came from Great Britain, she from Russia. And that brings me to an already installed summer school, that is the Rakiri Summer School, an initiative of Sweden, Russia and Germany. And I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. But, so the question is to you, Mrs. Mastonen, and to the colleagues from the agencies and ministries. So why not join the forces and, for example, include Poland, Denmark, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia to this summer school?
Okay, thank you. So why duplicate when there's already something like a summer school existing? Ms. Mustonen, would you be willing to comment on that?
We don't need to duplicate. Of course, if there exists already something we can join and enlarge and do, that would be definitively the best solution. I mean, basically the question what has been discussed when establishing this, what you explained and what we have been discussed, the problems and challenges are the same. And if there is already a proper model, that could be used, of course. That was not the meaning. That was just the model what we were discussing, that would be a summer school would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you very much. And someone would like to tap into that straight away. Can I have a microphone? And then I'll take the question there. I think, Katarina, you have a question related to this, right? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Hello, my name is Katarina Röbelen-Vogt, and I'm project manager in this Baltic Science Network. And one idea was really this mobility tool is also for existing summer school, that they can apply for money for additional contents, activities, whatever. So the basis for our concept and development was actually Rakiri Summer School.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you, yeah. Thank you very much. And if there are any further questions, then I think if you want to set up a summer school or tap into the already set up summer school by this mister, I think, will you be there for the coffee break? Will you be there for the coffee break? No? Yeah, I'm looking at you. Yeah. Yes? Okay. By the way, I'm having tomorrow one section about Baltic travel. This is what I call marketing, ladies and gentlemen. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay.
I am Vice Director for Research of Vilnius University, so actually we are almost like personal friends with Gintaras. But I would like, well, how to say that, a lot of discussions, a lot of presentations of possibilities for academic mobility, for exchange and so on. But just I would like just, how to say, maybe just provocative question from point of view of administrator. Last year, we passed benchmark evaluation of research capacities and research results of our institutions. So quite often, the situation was quite opposite. Well, doctoral students and young researchers, they're aware about exchange possibilities, but they are not willing to go for longer time exchange for training, and so they're quite comfortable. They are already in zone of comfort. They're satisfied with the situation as it is. So, how do you think? To what extent administration pushing, making such incentives? Like, well, how to say, like it's in a good university in Israel. If you don't go for PhD to abroad for your PhD for your postdoc training after your PhD abroad, your academic career is ruined.
So how would you consider such an approach? Sorry, I'm a little bit cynical, but as longer I'm working with an administration from just getting out of research, so I'm becoming more sometimes rather cynical, especially this is related to social sciences. We had a possibility, for example, well, of course, it's not this network, but up to 9 months postdoc program in Yale University. There were only 2 applications from social sciences. Yeah. So we were facing sometimes our opposite situation.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think we're going to run into a whole debate about the social sciences specifically, but regarding your first question, we would like to answer Ms. Mustonen. And then Mr. Müller. Thank you.
Definitively true, this question. We know also that in Finland, that is, people probably have so many opportunities in their home country or their home institution that they don't want to leave. And maybe they are afraid that when they are coming back. But I think that one issue is that we need, as I mentioned already, that there is also this cultural change. So we need to repeat it constantly, that it is definitively good for your career, as you mentioned, because and then again that your research is going to have better impact, and also you are going to be more competitive when you are applying funding. I mean, those what we can repeat, and if that doesn't help, then maybe later this person is not anymore in the academic field. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Müller?
First, I would say if students convene the impression that they feel okay and they are in a comfortable position, this is at first hand not a bad notice. It's also a good news. I mean, if they feel well catered and well trained and well integrated in their education, this is also a very good sign. So first of all, I think it is. It tells that your institution is working well and taking care of them. On the other hand, obviously, we want them to take other impulses, other ideas, and to go abroad and to be mobile. What you said is, and this is why Mrs. Mustonen has drafted or talked about these 3 tools. I think we need to think about short-term stays, which sometimes are easier to sell and easier to get. And all these 3 items are in a sense short-term stays. The longest is 3 months, which in our terms is still short. We would consider long-term from 9 or 12 months on, or more than 1 or 2 years. So these are short-term proposals we are doing, you have designed. And then what I find interesting and important to say is that there are certain academic careers in which mobility is particularly low, and that is not good. For instance, teacher training. Teachers in Germany, they don't go abroad, and that's too bad. Because after then, when they have finished their education, they will go to a school and they will find an international classroom very naturally. And how do you react to different children, different cultures, different languages, and so on. So students in teacher training, they need to be mobile, they need to go abroad. And we are having a new program specifically on that, because we think they all, more or less all, need to go abroad.
Okay, thank you so much. So, yeah.
I would like to actually debate this question of whether they are in a comfort zone or is it something else. So I don't know if you know about your countries. What is the average age of a PhD student when he or she graduates? Do you know it?
28, 29.
It's 28, 29, usually in very few countries. I've done many academic studies myself, studying academic career. I'm seeing across Europe, students are getting older. It means that they are in their mid-30s, they are close to 40s, especially in social sciences, they are older. In mathematics, in natural sciences, tend to be younger. So it's field-specific differences. And when you think about mobility packages have to fit this new reality where we have different students from different fields and people with their families in their mid-30s, well, if they have to think moving the whole family or moving only yourself, that's a big question. So it's one way, I think it's comfort zone can be, but also different reasons. So what is the background of our students? Because year by year, studies show that the PhD student is getting older. So that is for Europe. And we are competing internationally with UK, US, where PhD students are actually younger. In UK, they finish around 24 something, sometimes. It can be, if they're very smart, or 25, 26. To be honest, in Estonia, we don't start that early, our PhD studies. And we end them around mid-30s usually, or 40s.
Thank you for pointing that out. So if you look at the different instruments and if you want to make mobility happen, you should really cater the different kind of needs per country, but also the different age groups in which you find the PhD persons. Anyone who would like to respond to this? Mr. Vinicius.
Brief remark with regard to unwillingness of students to go somewhere abroad. First of all, we need to understand that at least in experimental sciences, people are doing their project in the lab, and just all of a sudden they realize that they need, to go, let's say, to Lund to do some measurements, or to Tartu or to Turku. And what happens next? Someone starts looking for the opportunities to fund their trip. And it turns out that, the funding scheme is strictly arranged. You can apply once or twice a year with the funding agency. And of course, this does not fit into your schedule, work schedule. So speaking about short-term projects, one needs to realize that we need to have flexible funding schemes which are readily available ad hoc if someone needs to do something, So maybe Baltic Sea Network Fund, whatever we call it in the future when it will be established, could, fulfill, this gap and make, travel money more accessible to students if they need them for their project.
Okay, thank you. And for that, of course, we need to have enough financial means. And that's probably the final question for this panel. What about funding? Is there enough funding available, yes or no? Or how can you attract more funding? Apart from the European programs and schemes that are already there. Anyone who could comment on that? How to attract more funding to make those mobility tools that you mentioned, Ms. Moestonen, a reality, but also to come with new mobility tools, for example, the twin labs as proposed by Mr. Valincius. How to attract more funding? Yes. If someone has this holy grail, I think everyone is very grateful.
I just want to mention, can I?
Yes.
So I just want to mention one interesting finding in the survey we carried out a couple of years ago. I was really surprised. We asked the participants the question if there are any possibilities to get funding from private sources, I mean from private companies, high-tech companies, or are there incentives to go abroad in one or another way related to accessing, companies? For example, for the life sciences students, I guess, opportunity to go to Medical Valley, where lots of companies are located related to our field, would be a real opportunity. And I was surprised that the answer was mostly negative. There is no practice, there is no funding schemes which support this type of mobility. And I believe, speaking about funding, business is really rich, especially in biomedical research fields. So we need to think somehow to involve businesses into those mobilities.
So like startups can get the seed funding, you would like to have something
well, it's not about
similar,
no,
or like
not
from the private companies themselves?
No, for example, we can consider schemes like this. For example, do your PhD, part of your PhD work at Novozymes company. And someone needs to fund this. Maybe negotiations needed with the business organizations and big companies which might be just initiators of this type of collaboration. But business needs somehow be involved, in international mobility of researchers.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Final remark by Ms. Mustonen.
I think that the mobility issue should be important to research institutions and universities, because it's directly linked to excellence and competitiveness of the universities. So in this network, we have discussed quite a lot, of the role of funders and ministries, but I think that we need to get on board universities and research institutions, because this is the issue of relevance to them as well. And if they are on board, they need to think about their own strategies and also to figure out if there is funding to this. Because we don't talk about a very big funding. If we pool funding together, it is not so much funding from one individual research institution or university. So I think that in the future we need to have more research actors, institutions.
Very good. So pooling funding. Okay, thank you very much. I'm only having one question left for you, and that's just to answer with one word, so that we have something that sticks for the coffee break. So my question to you is, what is the one word you think about when you think about mobility in the Baltic Sea region?
Competitiveness.
No, only one word.
If you let me use two words, the first word would be fantastic, but now I'm saying opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Graze.
Internationalization of research.
Okay, that's 3 words. My gosh. Okay.
Attractiveness.
Very good.
Knowledge.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for a panel. Okay, we're now going to have a coffee break next to this conference room, and I'd like to ask you to get back in the room at about 3:30. Thank you very much. So I think we've already learned quite a lot during the first session on mobility, and now we're going to discuss joint areas of research excellence in the Baltic Sea region, our answer to the future. Unlike with the mobility tools, this has been quite an extensive progress and process as well of mapping and identifying specific regions that can really bring a lot of benefits to the Baltic Sea region. So it is my great pleasure to first introduce to you Katharina Reubelen-Voigt, the project manager of the Baltic Science Network, to give a presentation. And she will be substituting Mr. Klaus van Lepel, who unfortunately couldn't make it in the end. But please, a warm welcome to Katharina.
Okay, hello. So my name is Katharina Reubelen-Voigt. I have been working in kind of Baltic Sea related issues now more than 10 years. And it's my sea because I live in Hamburg and I come from Finland. So I grew up on an island in the Baltic Sea. And I'm working for the Ministry of Science, Research and Equalities in Hamburg, who is the lead partner of Baltic Science Network. Which one is it? Yes. So before we established the Baltic Science Network, there was very heterogeneous landscape with fragmented efforts in the field of science and research policy. Some Nordic cooperation, Northern Dimension, the EU strategy, Baltic cooperation, and CBSS. And there was no macro-regional dimension in any area of science policy. There was no transnational Baltic Sea region body or organization dealing with science and research policy issues. And the BSR countries' consortia in projects funded by the EU were underrepresented. That is something we found out in a study where we analyzed a lot of data regarding cooperation, and consortia containing Baltic Sea region countries were really underrepresented in EU funded projects. And as mentioned already today, there was this brain drain from east to west. So, and then we started to think about why should we cooperate? Are there benefits to cooperation? And yes, of course, we can jointly use infrastructure. As mentioned already, we have a new cluster of large-scale research infrastructure also in our region, but also a lot of other excellent infrastructure. And of course, if you write joint articles, your name is mentioned more often, so you are quoted or also more often. And as also discussed in the mobility panel, is if you cooperate in the area of research, you build up your networks, which is especially important when you are young scientist. Skills are complementary, so that makes competitiveness higher. Your forces, yes, you have more mobilities, and the challenges, especially future challenges like climate change and the cleanliness of the Baltic Sea water and things like that, are not issues you can solve alone as one country. So joint solving of current and future challenges is quite important. And last but not least, in these times of globalization, you can, of course, kind of have battlefields in the whole world and cooperate everywhere, but maybe if you in the macro region join your forces, you are also more competitive in these times of globalization. So what did we in BSN? There was a study carried out. One of the authors will be a part of the panel. There were a huge amount of data analyzed, BSR research landscape as such, policies and strategies, national, transnational, participation in EU programs, and so on. And having all this, really, that was a huge amount of data, we defined 5 areas where the BSR especially is excellent. We know that there are many more topics or research areas where there is excellence in this region, but we looked for something which is excellent, where there is excellent in the most countries, or at least in more than 3 countries, in order to find some possibilities to cooperate. And these, 5 areas were marine research and maritime technology, cultural heritage and identity, life science, welfare society, and materials science. And then we discussed with all partners or participating institutions which would be the most important for them from their national view, or for, yes. And also we decided to leave marine research out because BONUS is existing already. It's a macro-regional, the only one, macro-regional funding program, and it's focusing on marine research. So we thought there is already a lot of cooperation because there are funds. So our 3 scientific areas to focus were life sciences, welfare state, and photon and neutron science, structural research. Next step was, so far we were discussing everything on ministerial, stakeholder, BSN partner level, but we all are not working as scientists. So our idea was, now we want to hear what people who are working in these areas of research and science, what do they think? What would be good to have in these 3 areas as common topics, as common strategies? Are there recommendations to their called homework for themselves, like we must change something, but also a wish list for funders, for example? And yeah, we had commissioned this study and needed the input of experts outside of the project. So we changed something from top down to a bottom up Yes. From all 3 research areas, members from different countries came together, and we had chairs and one co-chair, kind of who was also coordinator of this specific expert group from BSN partners. And these groups made, in the end, recommendations for academia and stakeholders. So the one of these expert groups was the group of life sciences that was coordinated by the University of Turku. And here's a list of members. I don't want to read all these members, but it's just to give you an example that it was a really international group of people from these research fields with a lot of experience and a lot of input and knowledge they brought with them to the groups. So here are the key recommendations. This is very short. I mean, all expert groups had in the end papers like 40 pages or something. So, you know, this is only one slide, but to give you a hint in which direction that was. So, strategic goals for priority areas. They had 3 priority areas. The first was fostering innovations in master and PhD studies in life sciences. And there were ideas to joint curriculum development and harmonization, short-term visits to partner organization, public-private partnership pilots, and joint specialization courses and summer schools. Here we have, again, summer schools. Priority area 2 was providing world-class infrastructure for BSR researchers, information about the important RI in the countries and their use, best practices of cross-border joint use of research infrastructure, platform for information exchange and competence sharing for RI providers, training of staff, use of research infrastructure in mobility pilots. And the third priority area was BSR world leader in life sciences industry, fostering partnerships with Scanbalt and involving companies in actions in priority 1 and 2. And each strategic goal had fast track and long-term actions. So then we have this expert group, Photon and Neutron Sciences and Structural Research. You can see the members list is even longer. And that was coordinated in Hamburg. The chair was from DESI, which is one of the large-scale research infrastructure in Hamburg, and co-chaired by my organization, by the Science Ministry in Hamburg. And this is what this group found out. We had also dimensions, or we called it dimensions, 4 dimensions: improvement of cooperation between RI, map cooperation potential in order to exploit synergies, and better integration of smaller scale RI and research institutes into the landscape of major RIs, and joint research groups and professorships, macro-regional cooperation initiatives. The next dimension is multilateral funding schemes, joint programs and projects, to prioritize fostering scientific excellence, long-term funding commitments, and strengthening of international cooperation in national funding programs. The third dimension was mobility and development of scientific, technical, and administrative personnel, support to short and long-term mobility programs, training and education schools, again the summer schools here, and avoiding brain drain establishment of incentives, meaning also for mobile researcher incentives to go back to their home countries. And last but not least, the 4th dimension is transfer innovation, societal acceptance, and industrial adoption, like national programs for supporting industry science cooperation and joint marketing of the macro region as scientific excellent region. That topic was also discussed in the first panel. And last but not least, there was an expert group on the future of the welfare state. Here's also a list of all experts. This group was chaired by Mia Schoen. I'm not sure how to pronounce that surname. about a senior researcher from Norwegian social research, and the co-coordination was done by CBSS. And here are the outputs of this group: to examine good practice adopted in BSR countries regarding demographic change and integration of older generations in the active labor force. Oh, sorry. Research regarding 2 labor force groups, the youngest and the oldest. You know, still integration because of the demographic change, still integrate the older workforce, but also how to ensure that the young people come to the labor market. Better integration of migrant workers, measures against the emerging social inequalities, exploration and support of dual earner or dual career model, education towards new manufacturing technologies, niche competencies needed, better understanding of the roles of state, market, community, family, and individual in a welfare state, and sustainable welfare state, of course. We have carried out some more studies. This is just, you can see here the titles. Challenges and barriers to research cooperation on in the Baltic Sea region, joint programming in a macro-regional setting, a roadmap for transnational utilization of existing and planned R&I infrastructure. All these publications can be found on the BSN website. And this is, of course, we have a lot of ideas, recommendations, and solutions, but we still see many challenges. So, for example, the Nordic-Scandic research cooperation is very strong and has a long, long history. We still have some gap between East and West, where we have to work. That will be topic in our 3rd panel also. And it's not only, there is, of course, research excellence in the new EU member countries, for example. But it's a question of the missing networks, actually, and also knowledge about programs, funding programs, experience in writing applications, and so on. And we have found out that for most researchers, they don't see the Baltic Sea region as such as a target region for scientific cooperations. And what I mentioned already, the BSR consortia in cooperation projects funded by the EU are still underrepresented. I think, yes.
Okay.
That was it. Thank you.
Please give a big hand to Ms. Rebelen-Vogt. Thank you very much. If you can take the seats, the first seat, thank you so much. And then we're going to continue with the panel, and it is my great pleasure to ask to step forward Mr. Kalervo Veninen, Director of the University of Turku, then Kazimierz Muzjal from the University of Gdansk and the Northern Centrum Scientific Foundation, and finally Ms. Gunhild Gustafsson, the former Director of Norskforsk. Thank you so much for joining me. Okay, thank you. And as we've done in the previous panel as well, it would be great if you can just give a very small introduction and also to elaborate on the question, what is, according to you, key to make research excellence in regions and specifically the Baltic Science region possible? So if I may start with Mr. Veninen.
Thank you. Well, I think our university...
Sorry, could you please switch on the button? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, our university was involved in this Baltic Sea Network from the very beginning, representing Finland, together with our neighbor, Åbo Academy, which is Swedish-speaking university in Turku. And we have the we were coordinating the work package mobility in higher education and research, as was already mentioned, and then we had leadership in this joint strategy work of life sciences. What comes to this second question, that what is very shortly important for this Baltic Sea region concerning the science. I think that to give very short answer is mobility, collaboration, and money, in this order.
Okay, that was it?
That was.
Oh, perfect. That's 1 minute. Okay, thank you very much, and that's very clear. Okay, next up, thank you.
My name is Kazimierz Musiał. I've already been introduced as one of the culprits behind the 5 disciplines or 5 research areas that have been defined as potentially excellent in the Baltic Sea region because of the report that I have written or co-edited, co-written with my colleagues from Tom Schumacher from Hamburg, and then who co-edited the whole project with me, and then there was a number of other colleagues who are mentioned in the whole paper, or this, as we call it, explorative study, who came literally from each of the countries around the Baltic Sea, which we were very happy about, and I believe this was one of the bidding arguments that allowed us to win in the competition to write this report. We have offered, basically, we have claimed to offer the knowledge from the whole scientific community around the Baltic Sea. So I would like to put one message, perhaps, which is good news, that based on this example of writing the explorative study, collaboration around the Baltic Sea is possible and beneficial. And we can learn a lot from each other, even from the smallest places which we have never heard of, or I have never heard of, even though I thought I was quite knowledgeable on the Baltic Sea region. So this is one of the basic elements which we can probably start with, that we get to know each other much better.
Yeah, thank you. So you found a couple of untapped areas that are now also connected to the Baltic Sea region practices. Very good. Ms. Gustafsson.
Thank you. I was the director of Nordforsk for 8 years. I left last year. During that time, Nordforsk became an associate member of the Baltic Sea Network. And we have also in Nordforsk a principle, which is that we can work with any other country in the world if we have 2 Nordic countries and 1 from the outside. It could also be more than 1 and so on. So, and we have had substantial cooperation with with Latvia, Estonia, and I think also partly Lithuania on small scale things. And I just heard that also after I retired from Nordforsk, there is an upcoming event where Estonia is a member of the Digital Security Network. So what did I learn of relevance for this? I think if you look forward, which is what we are doing today, I think the first message from me coming from the Nordic scene, where it took some time for the Nordics to establish this. And we had a long historical fight before we became friends and started to cooperate. And there are many small places in the Nordic countries. I think the first key for the future is to have a driver of the Baltic Sea Network again. It preferably an organization or a group that is established. You need somebody to make things happen. Other than that, it will just be a piece of kind of agreement on a piece of paper and nothing will happen. So that's a key issue. And I think Nordforsk, from that point of view, when we were established, we had a predecessor, but we were given much more power at that time. So that is that. I also think that patience, science, good quality of new knowledge takes time. So if you have the ambition to do something in the Baltic Sea region and do it together, you have to allow time for this to happen. Some areas are probably ahead of schedule already, but some may need quite a lot of kind of fostering to get there. And I think to create trust between the different involved parties is key. And it's not something you gain and then it sits there. You have to gain and regain and work on it. Also, and this quality of research is of course a precondition for impact. You cannot have impact if you don't have quality of research. So create trust and also across, which you have done so cleverly, I think, between the political level and the research communities, because very often there is misunderstanding between these two. Also, flexibility. Not everybody has to take part in everything. You can have a successful unit there, and they work together with some parts of the Baltic network, and you have some other successful combination elsewhere. So I think to allow this variation in terms of who takes part in what and who reaches out to different parts of the world on what has to be there.
Okay.
So that would be my experiences.
Thank you so much, and also for coming up with such concrete points. And I'm sure it's not so, well, it's easier said than done probably, because to keep your patience is difficult, but everyone knows you need to keep your patience to be able to ensure a certain degree of quality, of course, because research excellence, as we have agreed already in the previous session, that's really key to ensure that the Baltic Sea region can flourish. Coming back to this question of patience, then I'd like to come to Mr. Mugel. I think you did have a lot of patience as a kind of data tiger to gather all the inputs. So can you tell us a little bit more about the process? And also, okay, so you selected 5 research areas. Weren't you afraid to miss out on a certain area that might boom and flourish at a later stage?
Well, I'll start from the last question, and we'll tell you that we have been reducing the number of areas which we have identified as potentially excellent when we got the data. And of course, the more data we had, the more frustrated we were that potentially there would be some disciplines that we would have missed, or some areas that we would have not noticed. And I remember an exchange of emails with a representative from the ministry in Estonia who made us aware of some potentiality of Estonian research infrastructures which we would have simply missed out. But the point of missing things out of the picture was one of the challenges that we had to face to begin with, because this is how to guarantee, when we are talking about excelling in something, about excellence as such, how can you guarantee that you really get the right measure to say that something is excellent or not? So what we have decided to do was to go both qualitatively and quantitatively to the research, and gather, to begin with, bibliometric measures, which are obvious, objectified, if not objective, and the picture was very gloomy indeed. It was not a picture of the Baltic Sea region that is a sleeping beauty, but was a picture of the Baltic Sea region that is very unevenly distributed and very unevenly represented in the scientific literature and in top quotation and top citation impacts. So we thought there is something wrong. We know from our own experience that this is not the case. It's just the fact that you publish in a highly ranked American journal doesn't make you excellent each and every time. So what we had to do was somehow match it with the qualitative research and approaches, where we looked at the national roadmaps, national strategies to begin with. So it was like desk research, really looking at what the countries want to excel in, what kind of excellence they want potentially to achieve in the long-term or short-term perspective. And the desk study was then supported by the interviews with people who hold positions in the ministries, who have impact or have influence on the policy areas, and have had influence on the definitions or implementation of smart specializations, for instance. So we have had a dialogue with these people, confronting them sometimes with the bibliometric data that we had. And of course, the
and how was that? How was this confrontation?
It was obviously, some spoke of colonization of the world science by American and British journals, which is, of course, true and could be considered a valid argument. The others said, well, we are just too small. We are just too small even though we are excellent or potentially excellent, because if we have excellent researchers. I mean, Lithuania in many cases was a country where we have discovered, I thought I knew much of Lithuania, but I was so surprised to see how many excellent research groups, among others yours, were there. And we just reconsidered in our minds. We had to internalize a completely new picture of the Baltic Sea region and potentiality of the Baltic Sea region when we completed the study. So the reactions were very different sometimes when people were confronted, but we let people speak simply and ask them what they think the country should excel in the long-term and short-term perspective. And there you had some usually priority areas which were politically doable, right? Because that was another thing. I mean, we can define what potentially is something that the Baltic Sea region could excel in. The other thing is what is politically doable in the long and short term.
And there's always a tension between the two of them.
Well, there are just different temporalities, I would say, that are the question of the academic world. You spoke about the time of research to mature, right? So you have a temporality which is much longer than sometimes the government's last.
Yeah, but you managed to bring them together because in the end you now have 5 research areas that have been supported by everyone. So that's a very good thing. Ms. Gustafsson, what is your experience? Because you already said you go way back, you fought a bit in the beginning, but now you have a well-established network with Nordforsk. Did you experience the same kind of discussions, I would say, when it came to prioritizing your research areas?
It was this networking period, if I call it that, was before my time at Nordforsk. But before I became the director of Nordforsk, I was board member of Nordforsk, because I was then the deputy director general of the Swedish Research Council. And I think the big change came after the reorganization, when Nordforsk was handling some money from the Nordic Council of Ministers, on the condition that the 5 countries in the 5 Nordic countries contributed twice as much. And then we had a common protocol with international peers. First of all, we had the funders on our board, so we could continuously update the strategic priorities, which was key, I guess. And then when we decided to have a call on societal security or health, or One Health, it was the international peers that did the reviewing. And it was much to the surprise who won the competition very often. So it's a quite mature period at Nordforsk that I experienced. But before that, when we had Norfa, it was more networking and it was more like research education. Afterwards, networking, mobility, higher education was part of the centers of excellence that were often the kind of form we announced.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Vannanen.
Yes, I just want to remind that I think that it is very easy to speak about this critical mass and developing the critical mass, and especially from the point of view of research funding agency. I was working many years with in Finnish Academy. It is much more difficult to think, but it is absolutely necessary and as important as critical mass is the critical diversity. Because we can never predict very long time ahead. And if we lose the diversity of research and science, we could very quickly be in the position that we are running out of the competition by our own decisions. I know that this is extremely difficult because, especially in the funding agency, it's very difficult to say that, well, these are our priority areas. Let's put money to those. But at the same time, it means that you are excluding a number of areas which could be even much more important in 50 years or 20 years or so.
Okay, thank you. But wouldn't it then be a solution, perhaps, because you have identified those different research priorities? You don't want to miss out on anything, you said, Mr. Van Eynen, so you need some kind of diversity. But can't you really have some kind of like horizontal pillars? For example, we live in an area of digitalization, AI, robotics becomes very important, and we need to step up our efforts there in Europe. Can't that be like a horizontal pillar that you can use to kind of boost this diversity? What's your opinion on that?
Well, definitely, I think it can, and I'm not saying that we should not do these prioritization or profilation, but just to remind that there is, as always, there is another side of the story.
Very good.
Which is also important to remember.
Thank you. Who would like to react to that as well? Ms. Gustafsson.
I very much agree that you need this broader competence on a kind of disciplinary level, especially now when we live in the area of globalization and digitalization and so on. We might be confronted with some unexpected shocks or challenges where we need different competencies from what we think now. It's very easy to be caught in the kind of current challenges that we see now. But over time, I think we need to have basic science that is also prepared to work together. And that is the key, that you need both. You need to have a good base, but you need also to have preparation to work together. And there, I think the opinions has changed quite a lot. It used to be the idea in many research communities that if you work together, you do second class. You have to do pure political science or pure physics or whatever. Maybe the exception is the health field, where it's easy to see that you need to work together. But other than that, but now I think it's not the general attitude anymore. So I think we need this broader base, but we can still have priorities. And these priorities also are rather broad, the ones that are identified now. So from there, we could do a lot of different things.
Okay, thank you very much. So you have the priorities. You're mentioning and suggesting we need a kind of a broad base as well. As you might know, within the European Commission, there's talk now about the mission-oriented approach.
Yes.
Do the missions offer a kind of a solution in that sense?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I think that the mission-oriented approach on the EU level is very much a response to the kind of attitude science for science only. This is science for society as well. So it has to have some kind of mission,
yes,
some kind of
it needs to end
impact
up somewhere,
or potentiality,
exactly.
Not just for the science community so they can grow, but for other things, for more real things, for hands-on solutions to problems with environment or digitalization or other, which we don't see now.
Thank you very much. Does someone else want to react to this question? Yes?
I think this question of critical diversity is so important, and I must share with you one of my frustrations when I eventually saw the number of priority areas or areas that potentially might be excellent going down and down from 7 to 5 and then to 3 due to public demand, or obviously because of the questionnaires that were received back from the people who are the stakeholders. And one area in particular I was frustrated about was the cultural heritage and identity. Because this is something that, especially in the Baltic states, we saw which, well, due to the economic capital not being available, as you mentioned, in such an amount, could potentially really contribute on that with respect to the Baltic Sea region's future. And obviously, what I would like to stress that even though we have now reduced this number of potentially excellent disciplines to 3, I think this cultural heritage and identity issues and potential that is in the Baltic Sea region could potentially also solve a number of questions or issues that you have identified in the first panel. I mean, why do the PhD researchers in the Baltic Sea region go for Newcastle or Lancaster or, well, I don't mind Harvard, of course, but well, lesser known universities in the UK, instead of choosing a Baltic Sea region university where they would get probably a better training? Well, it's just because of the name, because they have no right narrative and the right image of the region as potentially science region. So I think missing out on certain disciplines which have to do with identity issues and with culture, well, basically reduces us to being reproducers of other cultures.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Ms. Rublen-Voogd. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment, we have not deleted them from the list or reduced the list in that sense, but we had to look at how much manpower we have in the project, and we could only establish 3 expert groups, not 7. Just, you know, we are not forget these topics, they are still there. And that was a starting point. And for example, in our case, that was really meant that these expert groups are like kind of ad hoc groups. They work for some months, and our groups decided to continue. They said this is really important that we talk with each other among the experts. And one expression we used a lot was variable geometry. And that was the idea that if programs or corporations are too fixed and everyone has to be there, there's always someone who does not want to do that. So for every topic, you have to sort out who is interested and who should be involved. And then one point also was, because we here have these areas of research, that cross-disciplinary research, of course, also becomes more and more important.
Okay, thank you. And if we want to tackle them all, we have to come back to the third point of Mr. Venanen, and that's funding, right? Always important. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to turn my attention to you. Are there any questions from your side that you would like to ask the panel? Anyone who has a burning question? No one? Really? Okay. Then I'll just take it back. I'd like to come to Mr. Venanen. This is a question really related to the research performance, because we can have a lot of ambitions.
Are you talking to
No, sorry, no, to Mr. Venanen. Yeah, I was looking at you, but exactly. So the research performance between the countries in the Baltic Sea region really has a great variety. So how can one close this gap in research performance?
Well, I don't think that there is a simple answer or easy answer.
You can try.
But if I try, I would still prefer to put this mobility of researchers and students in the first place, because that is the way how we can much more rapidly than any other way reduce these differences. And it will create this collaboration, as Gunilla mentioned, which is also one good tool to have a broad enough basis for the research. So I think that the first panel actually took the whole how you say, the most important thing, because I think that this we should find new ways to enhance the mobility. Otherwise, this Baltic Sea region will never be very powerhouse of the science.
Okay, very good. And it's a fair point. And in essence, those kind of sessions that we organize today, they all need to be interconnected. And then we come back to the point that indeed mobility is the foundation of everything. I have a question also for Mr. Mujal. So you have been involved in the expert group on the welfare state. And we've seen for all the expert groups a great set of recommendations. But the only thing, of course, that counts is to go from recommendations to implementation. Can you elaborate on that? How can you then implement those recommendations?
Well, I think I've already started touching upon this issue and speaking of different temporalities in the scientific life and in the political life, which is probably one of the biggest challenges. And behind that, you have, behind those different temporalities, where you, in science, knowledge and expertise, you need time and sustained support to guarantee the results in the long run. And sometimes, or very often, you do not know when you start what the results will be, if they are any good. On the other hand, you have the government logic, you have the political logic, which is run by fixed terms, fixed schedules, and uncertainty of long-term political support. So I think this is one of the challenges that really is there in the background whenever talking of translating any findings or any potential good solutions into politics, to convince the politicians, to show them that, well, there is an added value. Well, you need to keep in mind that there are just different logics behind those two worlds.
Okay, that's called lobbying, right?
Yes.
Can I comment?
Yes, you can.
I think that very often we kind of think that we have the results and then we will tell the politicians. And the politicians think that they won't need that at that time. When I was working at the Swedish Research Council, we had a chair who was a former minister. And he came up with something I think is worth repeating. He created something he called Researchers Meets Politicians. And it was high level, it was in the parliament. Some invited researchers who had previously agreed to be in dialogue with politicians were invited to speak. The concept was that you had to give your business card to these politicians, and when they needed to talk about your subject matter, they could call you. Not then, if they don't have the need then, but later they could come back and maybe not be given the recommendation, but have somebody to talk to who knows something about the field where you really want to make a change. This is 10 years ago or so. I think it still continues because it was such a success. So the idea was to create this dialogue and be open. And also you need, of course, the right researchers that are willing to go in dialogue and have coffee or have lunch or whatever. But I think this is one of the few examples I've had on successful implementation of research when it is kind of sustainable in that sense.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Van Anen, do you have a similar experience? Is there a gap between politicians and scientists, or do you yourself, as a rector of a university, manage to cover this gap?
Yeah, I think there is a gap, as was said. But on the other hand, I think it's also because of we as a researcher must also remember that it is our duty to repeatedly tell what we have found. And it is not so easy that you once say to someone that it is like this. I think that it is probably different in different cultures and different countries. You need different type of arrangements. But I think that for the research community, it would be definitely very important to arrange this type of dialogue, whatever is the details then.
Okay, thank you. So within this session, we have actually come to some concrete recommendation or proposal is to take your idea that you have experienced within Sweden to a broader platform, because apparently there is a need for that. And also, as you mentioned, Mr. Mujal, the cycles of research are way different from the cycles of politics. So in one way or the other, you need to try to bring them together. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have a final question to the panelists. And as you know, the theme of this session is about joint areas of research excellence in the Baltic Sea region. Our answer to the future. Well, no one has a crystal ball, but I'd like to know from the panelists, how has the BSR changed in a positive way 10 years from now, based on the decisions taken today? So if I may ask Ms. Gustafsson first to give a reply.
I think there will be more cooperation, because this is a need from the real problems in the real world. We cannot solve them without cooperation. And here, this network comes handy in.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mujal?
I think I couldn't agree more. I would just work at the word collaborative. Science is a sleeping beauty. It's not science as such, but collaborative science is a sleeping beauty, and we should make an effort to make full use of it.
So Sleeping Beauty is not completely vanished from the room yet. Okay, very good. Mr. Venänen. Can you turn on the button, please?
If we take maybe 20 years on it, then I think that we will have a Baltic Sea region type of research funding body, which is maybe the enlargement of the Nordforsk or something like that. And there will be also a lot of more collaboration, bilateral collaboration between different research institutions and universities.
Thank you. Katarina?
These small steps we have kind of done now in frame of the BSN project, they will continue, of course, and the BSR will be more competitive.
Okay. Thank you very much.
10 years.
That's very clear. And I think, if I may add as a final point, then I come back to one of the points made by Ms. Gustafsson. I think we all need to be drivers, right? I mean, it's a collaborative effort, but that comes back to the point of making collaboration happen. You are all drivers of this project. Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand to the panel. And now I allow you to have another coffee break, and I'd like to ask you to be back here at 4:45. Thank you very much. Thank you for being back in the room for the final session of today. And before we go to start with the final session, let me first make an announcement about tonight, because I'm sure you're keen to know what's going to happen tonight. So when we finish at about 5:45, 6 o'clock, there will be buses outside that will take you back to the Radisson Cess Hotel. And the same buses take you to the so-called Black Hat House for a guided tour. If you do not wish to join the guided tour, then please make sure you will be at the Black Hat House for dinner at 7 o'clock. And during the evening, which then starts indeed at 7 o'clock, we will start with an appetizer, there will be an award ceremony, there will be dinner, and there will be music. Not sure if there's going to be dancing, but there will be music. Okay, I hope this information is helpful. Otherwise, I'm going to repeat it at about 5:45 once again. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, final session, and that one will be about widening participation in the European research area. And as you might know, widening participation as a term actually came up in 2011, 2012, when the European Commission designed Horizon 2020, the current EU Research and Innovation Programme. And the aim of this specific programme, the Widening Participation Programme, was to really close the gap in research performance between EU15 and EU13 countries. So this session will be specifically dedicated to this. And I'd like to first ask to the floor Dr. Kadri Ukrainsky, Head of Chair, Professor in Research and Innovation Policy at the University of Tartu, who will give us an insight into the Baltic Science Network results. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our team was commissioned by the Baltic Science Network to study the participation of moderate and strong innovators in Horizon instruments, but also in Baltic Sea instruments, to see the challenges they encounter, but most importantly, to offer some kind of solutions. And we were especially commissioned to bring out the novel solution in terms that the solutions or instruments would not have been used before in this Baltic Sea region. So I'm trying to not to touch mobility and infrastructure, as you all know. So maybe a couple of words only about our study. That we used a bottom-up approach. That means that we were actually asking the researchers from different countries what is holding them back, which instruments they use, what experience they have, and use the data triangulation with the participation statistics. And based on that, we formulated different joint challenges we saw, and based on the challenges, we tried to figure out what kind of solutions could be found. And maybe I would first go to the challenges. Okay. First of all, what we discovered, and actually what Katarina said here before, the close physical or geographical proximity of those countries is not enough for research cooperation, and we cannot expect it just to happen. And what we also found is that the efficiency of our research and innovation policies that try to steer the researchers towards greater cooperation, it depends more and more on the functional proximity of the research that is done in the region and in the countries. And what I mean by functional proximity, it's the knowledge and innovation generating capacity in different countries with such focuses that is attracting the others to join, okay? So it's kind of like, if you would try to simplify it, it's a degree of symmetry or asymmetry of knowledge or innovation potential in those countries, okay? So if the asymmetry is smaller or symmetry is larger, then it's easier for the knowledge to flow from different partners to each other, right? So we should try to increase this functional proximity, because the different domain-specific, but also globalization-related or nation-state-specific interests and dynamics are not always helping to integrate this region, but rather are pulling the region apart. So this was one challenge we thought we should tackle with our instruments. And the second one was that there was a variety of instruments in Baltic Sea region, which was very good on one side for the research, that they had a variety of different funders and programs they could try to find or apply for research. But on the other hand, there was greater difficulty to keep track on them for the researchers, but for the ministries and for the intermediary organizations, it was really harder and harder to steer this kind of cooperation because of the variety of instruments and large number of them. And what also we have found in different countries that sometimes the funders were not very actively willing to contribute to the common pot. So it was kind of another difficulty that the accession of EU 13 countries or new member state was hindered by. Okay. So some other challenges. Actually, they were already meant discussed by Katarina, that although the cooperation has grown wider within Horizon and then the kind of, if you think about the integration or more, because the other partners in Europe have grown in cooperations as well, right? And the Baltic Sea region and also the newcomer countries, new member states, have not grown in their collaborative relationships as fast as the other. So the aims have not been realized. And even if it seems that some EU 13 countries have attracted more funding from, for example, Horizon, then the researchers tell you that they still are not in the core of the cooperative network. So it's the kind of aim is not achieved. Even it seems that the funding levels have increased. And also one specific challenge perhaps to new EU member state is that the new instruments in Horizon, which are related to different partnerships and involving more the user side and companies, they represent another important challenge because in such innovation systems which are more fragmented, it's difficult to find partners. And the partner finding is further hindered by different let's say, rules, regulations, procedures, habits, which we also may call relational proximity between different partners. And I think in long term, this relational proximity is hindering the functional proximity as well, as if you cannot understand the rules and regulations of funding and cannot apply because of that, then your networks are not created. And of course, this is true also for Baltic Sea region in general. If you have where you have a very fragmented and funding structures and also very high variety of instruments. And maybe it's enough from challenges now. Let's go to the solutions that we had tried to find. And here in this first scheme, you have our approach, which we took for increasing the functional proximity on one hand, and on the other hand, to increase the top-down steering possibility for the countries. And we used a very well-known typology of different policy instruments, which run from sticks and carrots to sermons. And we thought that if you want to have a stronger shift towards the aims or solving the challenges that we have found, then we need to use those instruments in combination, okay? So we need, for example, in order to increase the functional proximity, use also both regulative side, like the stick side, and also the sermon side, like talking about it, building the Baltic Sea region, right? And also in terms of increasing the steering, we need to use both regulative side and the support or carrot side of the instruments. And the instruments with what we came up for these regions were correspondingly how exactly the arrows show, right? The first functional proximity instruments. We first thought that, as Katarina as well said, that the Baltic Sea region is not a kind of natural cooperation area for many scientists. It's not a natural reason for cooperation. And we should kind of first start at building up the visibility that we want it to be a cooperation reason. And for that purpose, we thought that it would be worthwhile to attract the attention, or also somebody here said create the identity by building some prizes, awards, or challenges which have the Baltic Sea Network name. And also perhaps one instrument which has not been used here so much. It has been used by some countries, but not generally for a reason. For example, the second best funding option after, you know, the huge oversubscription problem with the Horizon. There are very good applications that remain just below the line. And it would be very nice to select some of them which, if they have good potential for the whole reason, to be funded by Baltic Sea countries. And also, this would be more kind of sermon side or kind of sharing the identity side. But also more practical side would be virtual service centers, which would be kind of platforms of information which would be updated regularly, so it's like up-to-date information about all different kinds of research infrastructures, funding possibilities, research topics, also researchers, because we have, in every country, we have their own information systems, and if you want to find some partner, it's quite difficult, especially for those, if you consider the widening issue, that those who have not had any track of cooperation. And also this, the last instrument concerns the support for the researchers. As I mentioned, the landscape of instruments is very fragmented and diverse, and there is a great difficulty for different researchers to keep track on all the instruments and their eligibility conditions and whatever details of those instruments. So it's difficult also for the different national intermediary organizations and their specialists to keep track. So basically what we proposed was to have a kind of shared service center where is like a cross-border rotation of staff, which would be built up like train-the-trainer principle. So people who help the researchers to gain, not also, why not from the universities, not only from the intermediate organizations, could rotate there, learn about the practices and procedures, etc., to support the researchers. Okay. And then instruments for the steering. There we proposed 3 different instruments, and it's basically top-down Baltic Sea region challenges, which the researchers could then tackle and try to solve by cooperating to the projects. And there, of course, the challenge for countries could be the joint funding, joint setting of the topics as usual, right? But it would again enable the region to develop such areas where they want to steer the cooperation towards to. For more novel and innovative ideas, there could be established a kind of Baltic Sea region accelerator. So for the risky projects which have high risk but potentially also high return, and which single countries alone would not fund, in cooperation it would be possible to have a larger number of them funded. And also the last one, which we called common service areas, would apply to the projects which aim at larger or wider diffusion. And they could be, for example, like kind of feasibility studies instead of in one country done, but in the whole region. So the wider diffusion of the research results could be possible, again, with joint funding. So basically that was everything we found out for the novel instruments. But of course, we also had some comments on mobility and infrastructure, but here I discussed only the novel ones. So maybe it was interesting for you. Thank you for listening.
As I was saying, thank you very much for your kind contribution. If you can take the first seat, that would be great. And now we are going to continue the discussion with the other panelists. And it is a great pleasure to welcome first Andries Sternbergs, Deputy Director of Research at the Institute of Solid State Physics of the University of Latvia. But he is not here. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, then we're just going to continue. Alexander Danda, Director of the Department of Science, Ministry of Science and Higher Education, Poland. Thank you so much for being here. And then also Josephine Tem Parnas, Senior Advisor at the Danish Agency for Higher Education and Science. Thank you so much for joining me over here. So, as we did in the previous panels as well, I'd like to ask the two people that have joined me to first introduce themselves, their organization quickly, and then also discuss the question, what is according to you key to not talk about widening participation anymore, but to only talk about international participation, because international participation simply sounds so much better than widening participation. Mr. Danda.
I assume the 2 minutes limit is still valid? Okay.
It is.
So I'll try to put it briefly. The Ministry of Science and Higher Education, and specifically the Department of Science, which I represent in here, in that respect, we deal with financing statutory research of Polish higher education institutions, so-called block funding. We deal with financing research infrastructure, big and small infrastructure. We deal with international research projects financing. And last but not least, we also do the research evaluation of Polish higher education institutions. So like a typical public administration institution, we deal both with policy making and with policy implementation. However, in Poland, we also do have this principle of new public management, which means that a part of policy implementation is being outsourced towards the quasi-autonomous non-governmental organizations, the executive agencies, and a part of that is also covering the thing that we are talking about in here, the widening participation, the participation in EU funds for research. So we've got this cooperation with National Contact Point in Poland, which is a part of Polish Academy of Sciences, and also there's the new player in Polish field right now, which is called NAWA, the SHIP, and that is Polish National Agency for Academic Exchange. So we are in process of redefining who does what exactly in Poland right now, but still ministry is the leading actor in that respect. As far as the key to forget about widening principle, well, I would say that would be the situation where there are no visible, no big differences in success rate for financing research applications. It was already covered in here in brief before. In Poland, we have a dream that once there will be this possibility, this situation when the success rate of people from new countries in Europe, in European Union, they have the same success rate or at least similar success rate as those from the west or south of Europe. And in order for that dream to come true, one must think about action both on national and international level. On national level, there needs to be some action taken by the means of regulation. I mean, in Poland we also did have, and we still do have, this situation of comfort zone, which was already tackled in here before. And what we tried to do was to make it into the big regulation, the new law on higher education and science, which was enforced last year. But, well, on the parliamentary stage, the mobility principle was opposed by some of the parties, so it did not pass. What we did succeed with, however, was to implement it in the lower level regulation, in the ministerial level regulation. Maybe I'll have some more time to talk about it later.
Thank you. I already gave you 1 minute extra. I'm just super relaxed for this final panel. So thank you for your contribution. And well, good that you pointed out, okay, only when there's no big differences in success rates we can truly talk about international participation. Ms. Temparnas.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so I am with the Danish Agency for Science and Higher Education in the Ministry of Higher Education and Science. I'm heading the EU policy unit of the EU department of the agency. So day-to-day stuff we're dealing with is implementation of Horizon 2020 and strengthening Danish participation in the framework program. And on that basis, providing input for the government's stance in the current Horizon Europe negotiations. So those are the sort of two key tasks so my perspective on widening stem from that, so to speak. And to me, I mean, I could say exactly the same as you, but I'd rather talk sort of solution-wise. I mean, we've spoken about this a lot in Baltic Science Network and today as well. There is no one simple key to widening participation and making that term go away, so to speak. It's a multitude of initiatives on a multitude of levels. And I just wanted to mention one example of the work we've been doing for the last year, because we are doing exactly what everyone else is trying to do to get our stakeholders as involved in the framework program as possible. So getting higher success rates and getting more people to take part of it. And we've recently spent 2 years preparing it, a national action plan for Danish participation in Horizon 2020 and sort of preparing for Horizon Europe as well. So looking into alongside stakeholders based on an extremely detailed analysis of the ways in which Danish stakeholders participate in international programs, especially Horizon Europe, and sort of looking into what are the myths among stakeholders about the framework program, what are the perceived obstacles, etc. So we are now working to implement this plan with 19 concrete initiatives to get more Danish participants to apply for...
19 or 90?
19.
Okay. That sounds more concrete than 90.
To get more Danish stakeholders to just apply for the program, to improve the quality of their applications, to get more Danish participants to try and become coordinators in Horizon Europe projects, which is important as well. And finally, to have a much better national coordination of the whole setup that would allow us to take place and benefit from the European public-private partnerships on research and innovation, which is, I think, also definitely one of the keys to sort of long-term participation in the framework program. So that would be sort of my immediate take on, yeah, that kind of work is the kind of stuff that helps, at least, solve this equation.
Thank you very much. So in one of those recommendations or action plans, in one of those 19 points, anything particular really related to this topic on widening participation, where you say, okay, in the future program on sharing excellence in Horizon Europe, we would like to have more or mirror these kind of instruments on the national level?
Well, I mean, one thing that relates exactly to what my colleague said is that every time a research team goes into writing an application for the framework program, we all know it takes a lot of time. It's extremely burdensome. And if you fail, even if the application is actually good enough to pass the threshold, but not among the top that will actually receive funding, it's extremely frustrating. And that's one of the things we've been looking into and will work on, is making this kind of pre-evaluation system where researchers can actually get someone qualified to look at the application with sort of objective eyes before actually committing and putting it into the participants portal, etc. Those kinds of ideas. That's just one concrete example.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that's very helpful, but in the end, it doesn't solve the problem when the funding runs out. Then it's just bad luck, right? Although you are above the threshold. Mr. Dunn, I think you wanted to reply to that, right?
Yeah, actually, what we started like 2 years ago is something similar, but not exactly in the same direction. I mean, we've got this program, governmental program called Grants for Grants, which is about giving some relatively small amount of money for those who applied towards EU funding, for those who came above the threshold, but there was not enough money for them to be granted the money for research. So they do get the financing from the government for rewriting and reapplying of the same or similar application, and it keeps the team together. So we found that it improved the success rate a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So that's a kind of a measure that you do upfront, so you have the grants for grants. Well, we talked a lot about, well, how can you accommodate those kind of new countries or the smaller countries, how to involve them better. So do you think it would be a good idea to change the evaluation criteria, for example, of Horizon 2020? Because now you have basically 3 of them. It's excellence, it's implementation, it's impact. But should we say, okay, you need to have a smaller state, a smaller university, which perhaps does not have this track record on board, although it is excellent? Ms. Temparnas.
Well, it's lovely to have such a concrete question. So the answer would be definitely no from our side. I mean, it's not an unfamiliar fact that this is one of the viewpoints exchanged across the negotiations tables in Brussels. I would say, just as objectively as possible, that I think, at least to me as a sort of European Union interested sociologist, that one of the key successes of Europe has been to establish a framework over decades that is actually known. I mean, Horizon 2020 is actually a brand that the users know, researchers want to take part of it. It is prestigious to participate, etc. That is because the program is based on excellence in its essence, so to speak. And I think we have to be very careful not to damage the work that we've been doing so thoroughly over so many years of actually getting to that place, because that is sort of, it's an unfamiliar success story, I would even say, of
it would be the wrong incentive.
I think we would lose much of the interest that we've actually managed to now get from the researchers that we want to help solve the challenges ahead of us and sort of be the basis of European competitiveness as such. And I actually really mean that. So it's not just a...
I see that you're very passionate about it, so that's very good. Dr. Ukransky, what's your view on that? Could you turn on the... Yeah.
I think it would help only partly, even if such criteria would be introduced, because it would be valid in case of instruments where you have bottom-up application activity. But in fact, in Horizon, you have much more compared to FP7, for example, instruments which rely partnerships and investments where this doesn't matter really. And also if you say like that the enterprises or SMEs are the largest group participating in Horizon, then also my question is that how would it be applied there? So it's what I see. It would help partly, or in some instruments, but not generally or as a whole. And I think also from the perspective of Estonia as one EU13 country, the horizon would not help us to restructure our research system only. Yeah. So we need our own input there. So use the structural funds and
exactly.
And our own funding.
So there are complementary structures like the structural funds. Mr. Danda, what's your view?
Well, I do agree that to have a sort of exclusive envelope for the smaller countries would not be good for the whole system. But we can think about some sort of maybe mandatory inclusion of widening countries into all of the calls for applications. Maybe that would be a sort of an answer. Instead of making widening instruments a separate set of instruments apart from the solid research funding, why don't we try to put that into the regular framework for funding research? Because as of now, what we have is the situation where widening instruments are mostly for support, for
twinning, teaming.
Yeah, for making the networks and not for the actual research being done. So if we want to see the learning by doing situation, then maybe this might be an answer. However, the interference with selection criteria might be sensitive. So I do partly agree with this.
But it's interesting because it's always nice in a panel to have some contradictory views. I would like to also reach out to you as an audience. Perhaps you are willing to share your view on this question. Would it be good to change the evaluation criteria? Yes or no? Is there anyone who would like to take the floor? Okay, I have someone over here. And another question and another. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just wanted to ask about your opinion about criteria in Horizon Europe. So as 2020 is coming to an end, so one as a little bit familiar with that, just so superficially with the policy, but one of the criteria was how to say inclusiveness. So it means that how to say, including also the countries, as I completely agree with Mr. Danda. So it should be how to say very, very carefully use this instrument. But well, as well, what you see, just Estonia is always presented in research and development as success story among these EU 13 countries. But even if you say that your researchers feel a little bit like second rank, so what to speak about others? So I would still, how to say, think about just concerning just the longer perspective of Europe. So how to say this in some way should be how to say this inclusiveness of these weaker partner, let's say, might be beneficial.
Thank you for sharing this. So you're entertaining this idea, Mr. over there in the middle. Can you please state your name as well?
Yes, I'm Christian Schäfer from the DAD office in Bonn. Concerning the criteria, I must say that at least personally I have the same opinion as a colleague from Denmark, so I think one should stick with this criteria because this is a profile of the program. But the question I would have, are these criteria also used strictly enough within the countries? Because in Germany we have the problem that we have very few universities only in the top ranks of all these university rankings. And so what the government did with the excellence strategy and the excellence initiative is saying that we have a very strict competition within the country with international review boards and so on. And those institutions or research clusters which are successful in this strict competition, they will get a lot of extra money. And of course, one could apply this in order to say the strongest will get extra money, hoping that they are getting so strong that they are also competitive on a European level. So the question would be, would it help to be more strict within one's own country with quality?
Thank you. But just quickly park that question because there was one, I think, comment. Yeah.
I am Maja Dambrova, Latvian Institute of Organic Synthesis and Riga Stradiņš University. I think that criteria are okay, even though also we have happened to be like number 2 or 3 in Europe, but not funded. So you are happy that you are evaluated as almost excellent, so I would prefer to be the last funded project, not the first without funding. However, for today's topic, I would like to say that this Baltic Science Network and also this exchange of opinions, and not just among researchers, but also our funding agencies and politicians, is very important for future, maybe to use those established information exchange channels to lobby for topics that are where we feel strong. And I think also that, for example, those topics that were mentioned as important for this region, maybe we should go for like those meetings in Brussels with understanding that also other researchers and countries of this region would be interested in certain topic where we think that excellence already is present. Thank you.
Thank you for your remark. And let us just take the question then from the gentleman from Germany. Should we solve it actually then on the national level to be more strict in handling the criteria instead of looking at the EU level? Would you like to comment, Dr. Kranjski? Yeah.
Yes, I think in Estonia we have long tradition of this excellence-driven strategy in science. So our experience is that with respect to Horizon cooperation, it pays off, and you have seen the relative success. However, if you look deeper at our experience, then if you analyze where our citations come or publications come, then you see behind that quite importantly the large-scale infrastructures and this kind of collaboration. So if we mostly talk here about like small-scale research projects with bottom-up ideas and competition, then this is not the success that we are resting on, really. But if to speak about the flaws of this excellence concentration that we have had in Estonia, then of course there is a huge discussion going on right now that there are few applications and the science should do more applied research than before. And if considering that the horizon has changed towards more applications, firms, public sector users, then of course there our competitive strength is a lot weaker, right? So it's kind of, you cannot have both at the same time, or if you're, especially in such kind of developing structure. So, but I wanted to comment also on the previous question that what we meant by not coming into core networks is that, especially in this bottom-up hectic competition, there are very interesting things going on because if the success rates are so low, very, let's say, weird factors become relevant. And we have identified a very interesting gaming behavior among research groups in Europe. You know, who will be the main applicant next time? You know, the project is written and there is a kind of gaming behavior behind. So it's kind of, I think it's much more complicated than that you should just select excellent projects in your country. So it's much more complex.
Thank you for this very elaborate view. Mr. Danda.
Yes, we are slowly drifting towards the question of comfort zone as well in here. So I already started tackling the issue. Let me continue then. What we tried to do with this new regulation on the country level, on the parliamentarian level, was to put the obligatory mobility for PhD candidates and for those who want to get habilitation. And it was crossed out of the regulation during the works at the Parliament. So what we did was to put some of those incentives into the regulations on ministerial level on research evaluation. What we've got right now is a completely new system of research evaluation in Poland being introduced, and one of the incentives in that system is the additional bonus points for international cooperation, because as of now in Poland it was and it still is relatively too easy to get the funding from national agencies like National Science Center or National Center for Research and Development. It isn't very easy, but it's relatively easier, definitely easier than to obtain the research from the European Union, and you can get the professional advancement, you can get the money for your research quite easily from national sources. So what we did was to put the additional incentives into the evaluation regulation, like 400% more points for ERC, 100% more points for other EU funding, and we are keeping our fingers crossed right now because, well, this is the work in progress. We still don't know what the outcome will be. The first evaluation will, according to those new rules, will be performed in 2021.
Okay, so we still need to be patient. Yep. Thank you very much. Ms. Parnas?
I don't think I have anything right now.
Okay, thank you.
This is great.
Okay, thank you. So we actually, as we have experienced before already, we perhaps too much have a comfort zone with regard to mobility. Students, researchers like to stay at home with regard to their own kind of research systems, science systems. But it's good to see then that you have built in, Mr. Danda, some incentives to make international collaboration more widespread also on the national level. Then I have a question for Dr. Okranski, and that is related to the novel instruments for the BSR that you presented. And I'm just wondering, also the BSN has published a position paper, right, on tackling widening participation in RNI from the Baltic Sea region perspective. And the recommendation that is being made there is to increase the use of transnational instruments such as Interreg for joint macro-regional RNI. My question is it clever to really add instruments to the plethora of instruments already out there? Because within widening we have teaming, we have twinning, then we have the different EU instruments, Marie Skłodowska-Curie, that's the national initiatives, the already existing regional initiatives. So why would you add instruments?
Yes, what we were proposing is to help the researchers and the intermediary organizations, but also administrative staff of universities to help the researchers to kind of cope with the diversity of the funding landscape, because we were not very trusting that it will change very quickly, right? So the diversity will still be there, and if you think about now the discussions about FP9, then we see rather new instruments coming, which we didn't have before, some kind of mission-oriented instruments, right? So, and of course Interreg is existing, so if it's if you increase the funding there, so it's it doesn't really change the landscape if the eligibility criteria, all the bureaucracy rules stay the same there. Okay, so it's kind of what we saw that since we cannot change so quickly the landscape, but we need to advance the cooperation within the region, we should rather think about the instruments, how to cope with that and help. not to create so much new, kind of very different type of instruments for the research to apply for and to understand for. So this was our kind of aim.
Okay, thank you very much. I can take a final question from the audience. Does anyone have a question to our panelists? An experience that you would like to share on widening participation? Okay. If not, then we're just going to fast forward a bit to 2021, because that will mark the start of Horizon Europe. New program, it's still under negotiation, but I'm sure they're going to build upon the results that we already have, because as the Commission calls it, it's not going to be a revolution, it's rather going to be a evolution. So my question is, there will be a part which is called Sharing Excellence, an intervention area which entails programs like the spread and the connection of excellence across the EU to reinforce the creation of high quality knowledge and to increase cross-sectorial, cross-disciplinary, cross-border cooperation. My question to all of you is, can you tell us how the Baltic Sea macro-region could tap into this program the best extent possible? So, ladies first. So, can I ask Ms. Parnas to take the question?
I think we have to keep doing what we're doing. I don't think any one of us will invent some sort of magic bullet that's going to make it much different. I had a conversation a couple of days ago with someone who said that it's like I'm sorry, but it's like a hamster licking a salt rock. You know, it takes a long time before you see any kind of result, but you have to keep going because at some point it will start to take shape. And I think, I mean, the whole issue of participation, it's a long, sort of arduous, hard work, and I think that we are, many of us, all of us, on the right track. We're asking the right questions. We, I think, realize that the framework program itself, for instance, is not going to solve all the issues and the challenges we have of being ready to use the framework program. We know that it's bound up with the national investments in research and innovation. We know it's about simplification, about efficient national contact points, about really being smart with smart specialization strategies and the use of structural funds to get that capacity building that is actually the sort of the key to getting in there. And for us as a EU 15 classic country who doesn't have, I mean, we participate in the program and we're proud of that. But it's a constant effort to keep, to maintain the levels of participation. So we're doing exactly the same as everyone else in the region, I think, which is, as you said as well, trying always to get, to focus the work programs, the biannual work programs on topics and calls that make sense to our researchers and our environments and helping our researchers and bust myths about the framework program and participation, doing stuff like the National Action Plan and looking into where we can actually support the researchers day to day and the trainer strategies, all that sort of work. So I'm sorry, it's a long, messy answer, but I think we
keep
need
going
to keep
and
going.
be patient.
We need to do what we're doing because I think we all know basically what it takes and that we can't sort of do magic and it'll be all right. But yeah. Sorry, long
if you could
answer.
do magic, we wouldn't be sitting here probably.
I think so.
Okay, Mr. Danda.
Yeah, let me start with some statement which might be a little bit controversial as far as the names are concerned in here, which is that Poland is quite opposed towards the renaming, the rebranding of widening instruments into sharing excellence. Because once we take a look at that phrase, it might, I stress might, it might suggest that excellence is non-existent in EU 13. The term sharing could be used in the term that one part of the continent has the excellence, the other one does not have, so we have to share. Of course, there is another way of looking at
So if you would rename it, what would be your suggestion?
I would stay with what we've got. Yeah. So in that respect, I fully agree with my predecessor in here. So I think that we are at the right track because there are some widening instruments which already fulfill that dream that I was talking about before. We've got some successful examples of teaming and area chairs which are as far as the success rate of Polish scientists is concerned, which are on par with the success rate in the rest of Europe. So it is possible within that framework, and I think that this leaking of the solid rock by the hamster is quite a good parallel of what we are doing. However, I would also stress that we need to go further, maybe to add a second hamster to that rock, in order to get the research funding, the funding for research incorporated into the widening principle.
Okay, thank you for wrapping it up so nicely. Dr. Ukrański?
Yes, I think for all the researchers, I would say learn the rules so quickly as you can, possibly, right, to start the game in the new horizon. But more seriously, for the EU 13 and smaller countries, I think try to use all different funding instruments, also structure funds and your own basic research funds in a complementary way. Talking from my own experience, my group has, or generally my faculty, like about 6% success rates in Estonian basic science competitions, which is like much tougher than Horizon right now in our field. And in Horizon 17%, and in structural funds 75%. So it's like the success rate differentials are huge. And of course, if I select where I'm applying, the answer is quite clear, right? Yeah. But it shouldn't be like this. So we should use the instruments complementary way to enhance the participation also in Horizon.
Thank you very much. So let us all find this big rock outside and start licking it all together. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a big hand to our panel. I'd like to ask you just to remain seated for now. I'll just quickly do some closing remarks, because I think we have learned a lot today. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the network has run for 3 years right now, but this is actually only the beginning and definitely not the end. So 3 years of a lot of preparation are now finally paying off, and the joint approach as showcased by the Baltic Sea region is for sure a promising one. It's a unique experience in a multi-level governance setting with ministries, science councils, universities, and multiple networks, because there are many platforms that bring a lot of support to the Baltic Sea region. And apart from the core partnership, each partner also brings in experiences and context that they have at the national level, and this is very important to the continuation of the BSN. But ladies and gentlemen, it is now all about the next step, going from strategy, recommendations to implementation. And luckily, there are already a couple of examples that we've heard today. The different research areas have been identified. There are different mobility tools that are being set up. So this is all very promising. And finally, I'd like to point out to you that also some of those ideas that have popped up within the Baltic Sea region's work already have a lot of trade-off and payoff and spillover to other projects in science. One example, for example, is that Hamburg, Skane and Copenhagen are working together in a HALOS project on life science research with photon neutron science. And the CBSS has initiated also Erasmus Plus projects with academic partners from the Baltic Science Network. So a lot of work remains to be done, but luckily we're not lazy, we're very active and energetic, and I hope that you can take the work forwards. Also tomorrow there will be a second day, the so-called Science Day. Do get involved there as well, because there the next steps for the network will be discussed. Finally, it was lovely having you as an audience. I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to repeat once again for those of you who were not in here at the beginning of this session, there will be buses leaving outside at about 6 o'clock, taking you to the hotel. If you don't want to join the tour, the guided tour that takes place afterwards to the Black Hat's house, then you can find your own way to make it to the Black Hat's house, because at 7 o'clock the dinner will get started over there. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.